It's the last day of Women's Month, the final day of winter, they tell us. It's a warm day here, as you can see, 27 degrees on the high felt. Myself, Elvis and Kendall, well, we're feeling the heat a little bit.
We're feeling the heat, gentlemen, but it's also feeling the heat of crime in this country.
Yeah. No doubt. Yes, that's our focus today, Kendall.
Absolutely, and we'd like to find out from you what your thoughts are on this particular matter, because the State of Urban Safety report in South Africa has indicated that while the national murder rate has increased over the fourth year in a row, it represents a sustained upward trend.
Yep, that and other little contact crimes, hijackings. A car gets hijacked every 32 minutes in South Africa, but it's muggings and contact street crimes that's really problematic, Elvis. So we put it to the poll.
The biggest threat to safety is, and this is what we put out to you, A, is it inadequate policing, poor conviction rate, or brazen criminals? And so far, 43% of you are saying that it's inadequate policing. 40%, of course, poor conviction.
Very interesting that the poor conviction rate, yeah. So between the two of them, it's 83% that talk about how authorities deal with contact crime and that kind of thing.
Yep, absolutely. It's the two things, the justice system and the police, that needs to be looked at. Musi tweets us, he says.
Oh, it's a fact. C'est fait, c'est un fait, he says. Brazen criminals, inadequate policing, a worsening gap between the wealthy and the forgotten, and a heart-wrenching unemployment rate.
Wow.
Yeah, inequality certainly has a role to play there as well. But we ask then, we try and personalize it a little bit, Elvis. How does this affect the individual? And that's our question of the day.
How does it affect you and me as the community and, of course, as a society? What sort of crimes have you been subjected to recently? We want to find out from you because we'd like to get your personal accounts of some of these stories. So let's take a look at what you are telling us. Makawe says corruption has been dominant. To get anything, you are forced to pay, which is absurd and unfair.
Francis Nicholson says theft of money and jewelry out of a safe in our home. Fingerprints of investigating officer found in safe. Police squash the case.
I tell you.
Yeah, Francis. Well, these are some of your concerns. There are many stories just like that. Interesting, though, that Cape Town and Nelson Mandela Bay are the two most violent cities coming out of the report. Now, the police statistics come out next week, and we'll follow up when that happens. But today, we're talking about these numbers. So we'll deal with that extensively. But we're also asking a sports question, of course. We've got a new coach.
Absolutely. That's been trending for the last couple of hours about how Otis Gibson, the former England bowling coach, is now the head coach of the Proteas. I want to find out from you, what are your thoughts? What do you make of Otis Gibson's appointment as the man to take over from Russell Domingo?
I would have preferred a local coach. I do not have confidence in him yet. He must prove his worth, says Jacob Sikosana.
Tough crowd, South Africans.
One way. They did win the T20 World Cup with him as coach, the Windies.
Yep.
Kutalo says, let's wait and see what he's going to deliver for our Proteas team.
Well, a boost for him is the fact that AB de Villiers will be playing across all formats, and that will certainly show up South Africa's batting. That's what we've got for you right now. Keep tweeting us. Let's get into the news, obviously.
President Jacob Zuma will today answer oral questions in the National Assembly. Eskom has until today to clarify its relation with Trillion Capital Holdings to the minister. And another ANC councillor has been gunned down in KwaZulu-Natal. We'll bring you all those stories in a short while, but first, before we get there, let's find out from Kendo Makamate what's happening on the sports front. A very good
Gentlemen, quite a lot happening on the sports front. Very exciting new era for the approach is about to begin. Let's see how he's going to pan out. He's got a massive test ahead of him. Bangladesh, who've just beaten Australia. That's Otis Gibson, the new coach, so I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, we'll have a chat around him a little bit later in the show. It'll be interesting to get your thoughts on him.
No, very good. I've got lots on this one. Now, good morning to you. This is what we've got for you in the sports today.
Team, you look at the pitch, especially when...
Cricket, South Africa confirms the cricket world's worst-kept secret and revealed England bowling coach Otis Gibson is the man to take over from Russell Domingo as head coach of the Proteas. And Bafana Bafana understand the importance of a full three-point haul in Cape Verde in the World Cup qualifying campaign.
So we're not going to go for a point, we're going to go for a win.
And with authority, Venus Williams is through to the third round of the U.S. Open.
The Venus Williams fairy tale continues as she eases through to the third round of the US Open in straight sets. Great news for the 40-year-old who's returning to the US Open after having started there some 17 years ago. All this and more a little later in the sports. For now, it's back to Elvis, who's got the news.
Thank you, Kendall. Top story this hour. President Jacob Zuma will today respond to questions for oral reply in the National Assembly and Parliament in Cape Town. Among the issues the President is expected to respond to are questions on the recent G20 summit in July, as well as the impact of the Siyahlola presidential program and other monitoring mechanisms on the communities. The state of the country's SOEs is also expected to top the agenda. This against the backdrop of what is happening at Eskom, the SABC, as well as SAA and other state-owned institutions. Meanwhile, the EFF leader Julius Malema says that they have reconsidered their decision to boycott parliamentary sittings featuring President Jacob Zuma. Malema says they will attend the President's oral reply session this afternoon.
We'll be reminding him that you have left the office long time ago. You are no longer saving our people. You are saving your own family, and you are even trying to secure it even for the future when you are not there. That's why everything else, it should be in your family, and everything else should be somehow related to the Zumas. So that's what we'll be doing. We'll be doing our job tomorrow, holding the executive accountable.
Meanwhile, Eskom has until today to heed the Public Enterprises Minister Lynn Brown's instruction to clarify its relation with Trillion Capital Holdings. The company is linked to the controversial Gupta family and consultancy firm McKinsey. Brown gave Eskom a 48-hour deadline after it admitted that it lied about paying more than 1.5 billion rand to Trillion and McKinsey. Initially, the power utility claimed that the payments were above board, following advocate Jeff Budlender's release of a damning report into Trillion. However, on Monday, Eskom was forced to concede that global management consultancy Oliver Wyman had concluded that the payments were based on prudent cost incurred and value created. Wyman had in fact red-flagged the payments and recommended a legal review of the transactions. Disturbing story now, another ANC councillor has been gunned down in KwaZulu-Natal. Police say Kwazikwakwe Mkhize was attacked by unknown assailants in the area of Mkambatini in Camperdown outside Durban last night. He was shot outside the gate of his home after attending a community meeting. South African Local Government Association said earlier this week that internal party political squabbles were among the main causes of political killings in the province. 5 association officials appeared before the Moerani Commission, which is still investigating the political killings in KwaZulu-Natal. The Hawks have asked the former Finance Minister Trevor Manuel to provide affidavits on the creation of a special investigative unit in the South African Revenue Service that allegedly spied on politicians. The unit says it wants to finalize the investigation. Before President Jacob Zuma fired him as the finance minister in March, Pravin Gordhan said the tax agency was set up when he was head of SARS, it acted within its mandate. Gordhan, opposition parties and civil society groups say the probe is politically motivated. Meanwhile, the Hawks have revealed that they are finally probing the lavish Sun City Gupta wedding. Acting Hawks head Lieutenant General Yolisa Matakata has confirmed that the Special Investigating Unit is investigating charges laid by the Democratic Alliance against the Mineral Resources Minister Mosebenzi Zwane and the Guptas. The opulent 2013 wedding is said to have been funded by taxpayers' money during Zwane's tenure as the Free State Agricultural MEC, when he allegedly authorized 184 million rand towards the glittering occasion. The details were revealed in the so-called Gupta emails. The DA then laid charges including racketeering and money laundering. The acting Hawks head confirmed the investigation before Parliament's Standing Committee on Finance. The man who's accused of killing a 22-year-old Soweto resident, Karabo Mokoena, is expected to be back in the Magistrates Court in Johannesburg today. 27-year-old Sandile Mantswe was supposed to have been formally charged yesterday, but he was not physically present in court. The magistrate indicated that the investigation was complete and the charge sheet had been finalized. Manswe allegedly murdered and set alight his 22-year-old girlfriend of 7 months. Mokoena was reported missing in April, and a photograph circulated on social media. Her charred remains were found in a veld in Lyndhurst here in Johannesburg. Manswe has denied killing her, saying that the part-time student committed suicide. He's facing charges of murder and defeating the ends of justice. Well, of course, it's that time of the day when we finish with your news, and we start with our theme today, focusing on the increase in crime and the safety of our country. So let's take a look at that poll, and we're asking you, of course, that very important question. If we can put up that poll, the biggest threat to your safety in this country, is it inadequate policing, poor conviction rate, or brazen criminals? Well, 43% are saying it's inadequate policing, 43%, or 41% rather, say it's inadequate policing, 43% are saying it's poor conviction rate, and only 16% says it's brazen criminals. So keep on voting, 23 hours to go. Let's start that conversation with him.
Yeah, obviously it's interesting how those numbers are changing as we speak. You see the live statistics come out. Of course, today we're looking at the State of Urban Safety report, and the numbers paint a gloomy picture, especially down in Cape Town. Now, the city and some of its notorious Cape Flats townships have again scooped the unwanted award of being the country's murder capital. Yeah, for the past 4 consecutive years, Nyanga Township recorded the highest murder rate in the country, while Manenberg and Mitchell's Plain continue to be rated amongst the world's gang-infested neighborhoods.
Cape Flats townships. Some of their names give a sense of a stable environment and a perfect socio-economic cohesion, while others instill fear even to the most decorated policemen and women. There is Grassy Park and Lavender Hill in the south of the city, while in the north there are areas such as Marikana, Lentegue, Lower Crossroads, Delft and Marcus Garvey, among others. These are the neighborhoods that are referred to as the killing fields. This view was further confirmed by a comprehensive report on the high rate of crime in the Cape Flats that was recently released by the South African Cities Network. NGOs and the police community forums that deal with crime and violence in these areas describe the report as shocking but not surprising.
I think firstly it's important to say that Cape Town, it's the same problem as the rest of South Africa. We don't have unique problems in Cape Town. We just have things that are in the same types of problem that are just experienced in a worse manner. So, and these are problems that are underlying violent crime in South Africa for decades. This is a legacy that came from the apartheid era, and we essentially, in our new South Africa, haven't addressed that legacy sufficiently. There are certain problems that have just continued in terms of things like unemployment and poverty, and other things that have gotten worse. Issues of access to guns, alcohol, drugs, certain social problems. So we need to, I think what this report does tell us is that there's lots of these factors and they affect different cities in different ways. So we need to understand in each city to unpack these problems in terms of how they manifest particularly. And it's also, as the report shows, not just the whole city. There are certain parts of the city that are particularly badly affected. And I think just as we know that inequality is so bad in South Africa, we also experience violence very unequally. In Cape Town, there are very safe neighborhoods and there are extremely dangerous neighborhoods.
One of the things that we've identified is an issue of environmental design. It's not easy to police Nyanga. One example will be if you drive around Nyanga, you'll pick up that one street. 5 streets are sharing one name. Now you can imagine if you're a police officer working at the Nyanga police station, you receive a call that there is something taking place at Tlati Street, you need first to understand, out of the 5 Tlati Street, which one? So those are some of the challenges that we've been raising with the local authorities, the provincial government and the national government. The other challenge is the fact that Nyanga has got a number of informal settlements, which also means it's difficult for the police to access some of those areas. Hence, we sit with serious problems. That's why I said at the beginning of the interview, we're experiencing most of these challenges in an area known as Philippi Brown's Farm. We've got informal settlements there, areas known like Osiahlala, Osianyanzela, Omesia. It's very difficult to police those areas.
In the past financial year, Nyanga topped the country's crime hotspots by recording 271 murders. Gang violence in Manenberg and certain parts of Mitchell's Plain led to the closure of schools and clinics. According to the safety and security authorities in the mother city, 10 crime hotspots in these areas are responsible for 50% of murder and other gang-related violent activities.
The thing known as crime intelligence now exists in name only, and every criminologist and every serious policeman will tell you so, that it has ceased to exist, it has not existed properly for years, and it is utterly dysfunctional. Crime intelligence now is stuff that you can read in the newspapers. That's what's reported as crime intelligence, is stuff that's already in the public domain. There is no more effective crime intelligence, and therein lies, in that whole setup there lies your problem. The fact that you're over 8,000 detectives short, and that shortage of detectives is a major crisis.
The city says it is doing everything possible to reverse this situation. But still, in Manenberg alone, there are more than 700 well-known gang bosses who are roaming the streets. Others are either not being arrested for their crimes, while others get arrested, but get released soon thereafter.
What I will add to the South African Cities Network, which they touch on but don't highlight as much, is the failure of the conviction rate. Yeah. The Khayelitsha Commission of Inquiry showed you that at the heart of Khayelitsha's violent crime and the mob justice that we see sits the frustration with the public who see criminals being caught and nothing happening to those criminals, and then they're resorting to their own absolutely horrific ways of meeting our justice. And that is a matter of great concern, because that conviction rate there for the main trio of violent crime and your other related, the serious violent crimes that they tracked, was around 3% in Khayelitsha. So that's a robust failure. If your wife, sister, mother or husband is a victim of that crime, and you know there's a 3 in 100 chance that the perpetrator is going to be held accountable, you will become deeply cynical of the criminal justice system and the state's ability to protect you.
The prevalence of firearms and shebeens in the townships is also complicating the situation. As a result, Smith says last year there were 2,800 shooting incidents in Manenberg alone. Next month, the police are expected to release the latest crime statistics. NGOs believe the situation is unlikely to change, and they believe the lasting situation can only emanate from here in Parliament through targeted legislative interventions. Manelisi Tubase for Newsroom in Parliament.
Comprehensive report there by Manelisi Tubase. Now, of course, we put it to the poll to you. This is the State of Urban Safety report talks to a variety of issues that are a problem. We ask you, what do you think the biggest threat to safety is? Now, we've got 111 votes in now. Inadequate policing and poor conviction rates, well, those are the ones that you guys telling us that you believe are the problem. Of course, on social media, let's have a look at some of the tweets I've got on my feed, people telling me a whole host of things that they believe the police are doing. This one from Katlejo, he tells us, poor conviction, seeing criminals given bail or walking free after 2 months is a threat. Poor justice system is a threat. Hijackers are in paradise in South Africa. Jamila van der Skeef tells us, Newsroom, the biggest crime I feel is rape. There are a lot of victims of rape, including young women and children. It needs to be stopped. Yes, Jamila, no doubt. Rape is one of the great threats to our nation. Not only does it affect the victim, it affects generations. Of course, we also got a question today, and we personalize it today. What crimes have you been subjected to recently? Well, I've been car jammed and jacked a couple of times in the last year. Let's have a look at what you guys tell us. This one from Katlejo, he says, ambush, kidnapping and housebreaking is high in my village. Sterkspruit in the Eastern Cape. People can't walk freely at night. Police visibility is a problem. I think that is a real issue. People can't walk the streets at night anywhere, it seems, right now. Matthias tells us, Newsroom, in my street we had 4 knife murders in 1 year. Mr. Mushura, that is a concern. Trevino tells us, I was robbed by a tikop in my area. Those of you who don't know what a tikop is, of course, that is a meth addict. Yes, drugs are out of control in our communities, and the crime of heinous crimes that we are seeing are often because of the scourge of drugs. So getting robbed by a tikop and not getting harmed is almost a blessing these days, I tell you. Anyhow, let's go onto our social pages now and look at the trends. We'll start with what's on Twitter. Of course, the SABC board has been trending. Yeah, interviews are underway for the new board. Viewers were enjoying the live interview process in Parliament yesterday. Some already picking out their favorite candidates. Very interesting process. Then there are more than 26,500 tweets about the student who mistakenly received 4. Interesting, more than 3,000 students could have been funded. Moving to Mecca, 2 million people are expected to be making their way and slowly arriving at the Hajj. This image is of a massive area of tents set up for the event. Not even heat, age or disability deterring those who wish to attend this holy festival. Hajj 2017 is the hashtag. Moving further afield, cleanup operations are underway in areas left devastated by Hurricane Harvey. Some hospitals were affected and had to close, and around 350 alligators are said to be on the loose in these areas. But of course, there's a little bit of good news. Comedian Kevin Hart is challenging all American celebs to donate money to the rescue operation. Sandra Bullock and Leonardo DiCaprio are amongst those who've donated $1 million for the relief fund as it is. To see who else has participated, take a look at the hashtag Hurricane Harvey Relief Challenge, and remember the heat that the First Lady Melania Trump was receiving for wearing high heels to such affected areas. Now this image is captioned, new shoes for Melania Trump in anticipation of a trip to Houston. Hashtag Texas flood. I tell you what, let's hope that Floyd Mayweather gives a few dollars of the hundreds of millions he's made out of this farce over the last weekend. Anyhow, while all the eyes are on Texas, let us not forget about the devastation that flooding has caused in other parts of the world. Sierra Leone, Bangladesh, and Nepal and of course India. Now, more than 1,200 lives have been lost and more than 2 million people are homeless. And we worry about what's happening in Texas, I tell you. Now, our pick of the day. This one comes from Tabiso Sitole, who is our very own, of course, Mr. Sports Live. You'll be reminded. Now, he's captioned, just in, official, Cricket South Africa have confirmed West Indian Otis Gibson as the new Protea cricket coach. There you have a picture of Otis Gibson. Let's hope that he comes in and really gets the Proteas to, well, win the big tournaments. Now, let's take a look at our comment of the day. This one from Vanessa O'Hanlon, who says the following, and I am in full agreement with this. While the focus has been on Texas, monsoon flooding has claimed more than 1,200 lives across India, Bangladesh and Nepal. But we don't see celebrities giving money for that, do we? Anyhow, it's the state of the world we live in, I suppose. Let's take a look at what's happening in the courts now. We'll start in KwaZulu-Natal, where the alleged places for cash scam at the University of KwaZulu-Natal's Nelson Mandela School of Medicine continues in the Pine Town Magistrates Court today. A man and his wife are facing corruption charges after they allegedly accepted bribes to buy students' places at the local medical school. The arrest came after an undercover operation by the Hawks that took place earlier this year. Then, here in Johannesburg, The man who's accused of killing 22-year-old Soweto resident Karabo Mokoena is expected to be back in the Johannesburg Magistrates Court today. 27-year-old Sandile Mantswe was supposed to have been formally charged yesterday, but he wasn't physically present in court. The magistrate indicated that the investigation was complete and the charge sheet in that case has been finalized. Of course, Women's Month comes to an end today, and of course, this is a story close to the heart of many South Africans. Some call it a metaphor of what is happening to our women in this country. Now, tomorrow, we've got something completely different lined up. Yes, we'll have a look at medical negligence and how it seems to be escalating here in South Africa. What happens when a doctor misdiagnoses you? Well, I've had an incident like that in my own family recently. Anyhow, we're going to take a short little commercial break. Newsroom will be back with you right after this.
Africans are increasingly using digital platforms for life, work and play.
Information is key for us. We live in an information age. We live in the digital age.
I'm mostly on WhatsApp because not all my friends have iPhones, so they don't have FaceTime.
On Network, we tell you about Africa's technology and social media landscape. And some here are using the internet to raise political concerns.
Some of the exposés on political issues come from what we call your diasporic online media.
Africans are also using technology to create. For African technology and social media news, join me, Phumelele Zondi, on Network every Sunday at 9 p.m.
I'm Marcelo Torres, and this is SBT, one of the leading TV networks in Brazil.
I am host of the political debate program Crosstalk. I'm very pleased to be with you at this very important event.
We are India's largest 24-hour news network, and I look forward to the opportunity of talking about BRICS.
My name is Criselda Lewis from the South African Broadcasting Corporation. See you in Beijing.
I look forward to welcoming my counterparts from the other BRICS countries in a first ever 5-way televised debate.
Yeah, welcome back. We're looking at the state of safety. And of course, the city of Cape Town and Nelson Mandela Bay, Port Elizabeth, are rated as the most violent metros in South Africa. And this is purely based on the murder rates there. Now, this is according to the State of Urban Safety report that was released last week. The report says Cape Town has the highest rate of crime detected through police work. The 9 large urban municipalities analysed in the report is home to about 40% of the residents of South Africa and accounts for most of the violent crimes committed in this country. Now, to talk to us a little bit about the 2017 State of Urban Safety report, we are joined by a researcher at Urban Safety at the South African Cities Network, Spelele Ngobese. Very good morning to you, my dear.
Morning. How are you?
Very, very, very good today. I'm a little bit concerned. It seems as if crime is escalating in South Africa. Is that accurate or is that alarmist?
We get that question a lot. Is South Africa getting safer? I think if we look at it in terms of what the national data is telling us, that's saying that in the last 20 years, we've halved our murder rates. In 1994 and 1995, we were at 64 murders per 100,000 people. We are now at 34 murders per 100,000 people. So a big milestone, a big improvement that we've been able to make. But our murder rates still remain at 5 times the global average. So although we've improved, although we've done well over the last 20 years, there's still a long road ahead. And if we break that down to city level, we can then get a clearer picture of exactly what. Because national crime data gives us a very general picture of what's going on in terms of crime and violence. But then the research that we've done looking at the state of safety, if aggregated at city level, it gives you a clearer picture. Therefore, you can tell that which cities are performing in different sets of crime and in different crime types. Not necessarily for comparative purposes, but so that cities can tailor their intervention.
It's not a competition. People always see it as a competition. Cape Town, Joburg, Durban, and so forth. The sad reality is, though, that Cape Town is becoming problematic. 40% increase over the last couple of years, that's simply too much. Can it be as simple as saying, as they always say in Cape Town, oh, it's gang activity, or is it a scenario that with rapid urbanization, the city is not coping?
I would say the immediate reaction, as I saw on your poll, a lot of what citizens are feeling is that the police are not doing enough. There's dissatisfaction with police responsiveness and response to these kinds of crimes. But I would say it's microcosmic of what's happening in cities across South Africa. Although Cape Town might be kind of jarring when you look at the numbers, it seems like there's been a dramatic kind of increase in crime, as you say, over the last year particularly. But we tend to look at it in terms of the social. I think it correlates what you saw in your reactions when you looked at the tweets from your viewers, where people are concerned. Like, we've had so many street robberies in my street. It correlates with our research, where although we have the numbers, the hardcore stats, we've also gone into crime hotspots where we've spoken to people and have subjective indicators. You
talk about the street robberies. This is exactly the thing that seems to be happening quite a lot, is that 3-4 guys come, they just, you know, wherever you are on the street, they rob people of everything on the street. I think this is from Port Elizabeth, if I'm not mistaken. Oh, from Durban. No, this is from Durban. But this kind of contact crime, it doesn't receive the priorities of murder and rape and so forth. But the numbers on this is well on the increase, and the streets are becoming less safe. Is that accurate?
In some places, the perceptions of crime and the reality of crime kind of correlate, and I would say that's the case with Cape Town, Nelson Mandela Bay, and so on, where we ask people about their perceptions of crime. People feel like they are overrun with crime. They think about crime at least once every 2 weeks. That's in terms of the kinds of questions we've asked them in our surveys. And there is this feeling, and it may or may not be a reality, that the police are not doing enough. But the argument that we tend to make is that given the unprecedented volumes of violent crime in South Africa, I think a lot has to come together with the policing. In addition to policing, we need to look at social interventions, looking at early childhood development and so on. Because our argument is that there's stuff that you honestly can't police.
Inequality is one of those threats, of course. Jobs is another thing. You can go down the list of all the social ills. The one thing that concerns me, though, is that the low conviction rates that we see in our courts. Are you concerned about that, and how do we overcome that kind of thing?
Our research, I must say, is at city level, at local government level, dealing with the metros. So I think we craft our thinking and our interventions around enabling local governments, municipalities, particularly the metros, to respond in more measured, more researched ways. So I wouldn't say that our messaging, it considers crime and justice in terms of courts and so on. We deal with, at the local level, enabling local governments, because again, local governments is where it all happens. It's where all delivery happens, and it's where it's the most responsive level of government, and it's the level of action. So that's where we direct our messaging.
If we look at some of the tweets coming in, you'll see that people talk about corruption as another big one, both within the police and other spheres, and that this kind of sets the tone. I know you can't really give me an answer on that, but let me take it to Port Elizabeth, because the friendly city is what it's called. Why are there so many murders being committed in the friendly city?
I think that correlates with our own research, where it says that you have to, there's a lot that goes into people's people's perceptions of police and whether people feel that they can report. People feel that police are corrupt. People feel that police side with criminals in a lot of instances.
Yeah.
So whether that is perception or reality, we feel that there is a need to address people's relationships with policing, because if responses to crime and violence are going to be happening at community level, it's very important for people to have positive relationships with police and so on.
How do you view activism within communities? Because we see that activism in communities in some areas is bearing fruit. Places like Chatsworth in Durban, the community policing forums doing quite well. Bonteheuwel in the Cape, where they've managed to turn around a war zone into doing a little bit better, still not ideal. So activism in our communities, how do we get people to participate in their own communities, you think?
For us, I think that is a critical part of turning this tide around. I think community involvement and community activism. So for us, again, it's where we say not everything can be policed. So you need spatial interventions that critically change space, that enables people to be present in public space, because we find that crime keeps people from being in public space. And so if you create a spatial environment that discourages criminal activity and encourages people to be present, eyes on the street and so on. So we feel that that is where planners come in, town planners come in to create the kind of spaces and to say that everybody has a role in the creation of safer cities.
Are the kind of things we're seeing, which is security companies, private, I think we've got 700 or 900 private security companies in South Africa, are they helping to bring the crime rates down? The numbers haven't come down.
Yes, so we tend to conceptualize that as you need to see the distinction between security and safety. You can take security measures, you can securitize, but that doesn't always translate to safety and safer communities. So that's why we preach social interventions, youth programs, early childhood interventions, and long-term engagement, long-term safety strategies that speak to more than just security, because you can have security that gives you a sense of safety, but that doesn't always translate.
You're telling us let's treat the disease and not the symptoms.
Yes. Yes, yes.
Fantastic. Now, you're putting forward some recommendations, I'm sure. What are those recommendations that you're putting forward? And are you getting the right responses as a group?
I think the Urban Safety Reference Group has been in effect from 2014. I think at city level, in terms of getting cities to start thinking in a more integrated way about safety, I think we've made some headway in that sense. So in terms of our key messaging and some of the recommendations that we make in the report is that city responses must be based on knowledge. So we push that knowledge-based decision-making. We also say that safety is everyone's concern. It's not just a matter of policing. You need your social development practitioners. You need your city planners. It's a spatial thing. It's a social development thing. It's an economic thing. So in addition to hardcore policing and security, conventional security, you need those. So among the recommendations we make is those.
It's about untangling the entire networks that exist to create these fertile grounds for crime to flourish. Thank you for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
That was a very nice interview. Enjoyed that. Now, I can tell you that is a researcher in urban safety at the South African Cities Network. Her name is Spilele Ngobese, and we spoke at length about, well, what needs to be done. And it's a end-to-end value chain kind of thing, like anything. Let's treat it as is all of our business, and maybe then it will change. Of course, we put it to you. We're asking you, well, the biggest threat to safety is what, according to you? Is it inadequate policing? Is it poor conviction rates that sees the criminals back on the streets? Or are the criminals sophisticated, brazen, and well-resourced? Well, out of 123 votes, the majority say it's a poor conviction rate. So that is something that we have to look at. You know, if you see criminals shooting at each other outside the magistrate's court in Bellville in the main road in Cape Town, then you know something is not right. Anyhow, here are your tweets, guys. Desley Lifelo tweets us, says, crime will finish, but we can reduce it We'll have a finish, but we'll reduce it by having a good justice system. Talking exactly about conviction. Yes, the justice system, that's what we need to look at as well. The police must work hard because it's getting worse, and I think this is the time that the law must be up, especially for criminals. Our Blessing, thanks Blessing. This one from Sibel, tell us the government. It's not as simple as that. It's not as simple as that, and we can't blame everything on the government. If you have a problem with crime in your community, you need to be an activist also. We all need to contribute. It is all of our problem, and we need to stop doing this. Anyhow, here are a look at the front pages from around the world. The South China Morning Post reports that Foreign Minister Wang Yi yesterday dismissed the idea to issue a statement condemning North Korea's launch of a missile over Japan's airspace. This as the United Security Council met in an emergency meeting over exactly this. Then in Florida, the Miami Herald says, acknowledging the painful legacy of slavery and the Civil War, Hollywood commissioners decided Wednesday to rename 3 streets honoring Confederate generals that for the better part of the century have run through a predominantly black city neighborhood. Then, finally, in the United Kingdom, The Guardian reports that Theresa May's attempt to talk tough on North Korea has exposed a weak and vulnerable leader hobbled by June's election fiasco. A state-run Chinese newspaper has confirmed this. Now, we're going to take a short little break, but after the break, we'll continue this talk and we'll talk to, well, the gentleman who kind of oversees all the private security companies. What are they seeing? What are they doing? And why are the crime numbers not coming down? Now, he's waiting for us in Durban, actually, and Elvis is going to do that interview. Don't miss it.
This story is about what happens when we put our differences aside and we come together as a human race.
Salt makes its way out of the kitchen into the art studio.
Normally, you know, salt is for food and stuff, but then here's salt.
Past couple of months, I've grown so much, and I'm just ready to impart what I've learned to the next Miss South Africa.
I wasn't expecting this. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I'm feeling so overwhelmed.
For your weekly dose of entertainment news, tune into Trends every Saturday from 12 to 1.
With the stories of abuse from the other 8, but they haven't been ready to pursue any angles. They've offered their support. They've offered the comfort to the 8, and it's been an amazing journey.
It feels like your heart actually literally sunk in your shoes.
It wasn't a long encounter. I think at the time I froze.
The way the criminal justice system deals with sexual violence is problematic. And I don't know, unless there's a fundamental change in many things, the way prosecutors deal with the victim in the matter.
For all investigative insights, stay tuned to Special Assignment every Saturday at 17:30.
Now, South Africa is said to be having the largest private security industry in the world. Did you know that? With nearly 9,000 registered companies, South Africa's suburbs and businesses are wired with alarms and surrounded by high walls, barbed wire, electric fences, and motion sensors. Private security has become a major issue with residents spending large amounts of money on so-called tactical response units. Now, in spite of all of this, we can feel and see that crime is on the increase in cities in South Africa. Now, in our Durban studios, we have the Private Security Industry Regulatory Association, or PSIRA, the Chief Executive Officer, Manabela Chauke. A very good morning to you, sir, and welcome.
Good morning to you, and good morning to the viewers.
Now, what is your assessment of the state of safety in South African cities, taking in consideration the 2017 report by the South African Cities Network that indicate that there's a major increase in crimes in cities?
Well, there is, the report points to an increase in crime in certain areas. So of course, it also points to some improvement in certain areas as well of society. There's quite a lot of interventions that the police are doing, and everyone else who's involved in crime fighting in the country.
Now, we believe that suburbs, and we've seen it also here in Johannesburg, and businesses are all wired with alarms. They got high walls around them, they got electric fences, they got motion sensors, and of course armed security that service them. Why is it that South Africans, you believe, are living in fear, and what is the role of the private security industry?
Well, the role of the private security industry, of course, is to protect those who are capable of paying, or those who can afford to pay for security. As we might know, that the role of the police is to protect members of the public. But of course, private security is involved mainly in those in private, those that are able to pay for themselves. Of course, there are various reasons why South Africans do have alarms in their houses, and do have all sorts of security gadgets in their houses. As the report itself points out, part of the reasons is the fear of crime, part of the reasons is because crime does really exist in society.
Mm-hmm. Is the private security companies value-based or profit-driven? Is that the impact, and what impact do you have in those societies where you are currently engaged in?
Well, I think the private security industry is both value-based and profit-driven. I think, first of all, there is a lot of value that we see. We all know that there is a role that the private security industry plays insofar as crime prevention is concerned. Most of the protection services that they offer are the first line of protection services before even the police can arrive. So there is kind of value that they provide in society. We've also done such a research ourselves, which points out that where there is partnerships between the police services, or what you call your public police agencies, with the private security industry, there's quite some significant, inroads in terms of crime prevention.
Now, in my introduction, I did indicate that South Africa is having the largest private security industry in the world. Do you concur with that number, and is it growing, and why?
Well, I wouldn't say perhaps we're the largest. We're perhaps amongst the largest in the country. And earlier on, we talking about a figure of 900. It's actually, the correct figures are just above 9,500 security companies. And probably there's many reasons why the number is growing. There's all sorts of reasons pointing. One would look at also, if the economy grows, of course, the number of security services would also grow. If the population grows, it also grows. And there's many other factors that we may not even be able to point at the moment. That actually influences the growth of the private security industry.
There are some concerns that the security industry is involved in the increase in crime in order to rack up their business. Your thoughts on that?
I think it is incorrect. I think it's a misconception. I think primarily we have very good men and women who are in the private security industry who are quite very honest. We also have a very stringent code of conduct that governs their conduct in this industry. So I think that perception is quite incorrect. Of course, there are pockets of those that are outside, that always, some of those that play outside the law, we are able to deal with them as in when we are that is brought to our attention.
Now, we heard earlier from our guests that we need an integrated approach to fighting crime. What do you think, what is your solution as the private security industry, and do you work in alliance with the police to curb the increase in crime that we see in our cities?
I believe that the integrated approach does work. As we said earlier on, that we have done research where we were looking at what are the crime preventing partnerships that we can put together between the public police agencies with the private security industry. Indeed, it's a combination of all kind of strategies that needs to be played. The society needs to play a role, the police needs to play a role, the private security industry needs to play a role, and everyone else needs to play quite a role to ensure that we deal with the issue of crime in the country. So those are some of the strategies that would work.
I thank you so much, Mr. Chauke, for your time and joining us in our Durban studios.
Thank you very much.
Now that was the Private Security Industry Regulatory Authority Chief Executive Officer Manabela Chauke from our Durban studio. So what do you make of all of this? Of course, we're conducting a poll to find out from you, what do you make of crime in the country and what it is linked to, and we want to find out from you, is it poor conviction rates? Let's take a look at that poll if we can set it up quickly. There we go. Is it poor conviction rate? Is it inadequate policing, or is it brazen criminals that is driving the crime in our city, the biggest threat to our safety in this country? So far, 39% says it's inadequate policing, 45% are saying it's poor conviction rates, and only 16% says it's brazen criminals. Keep them coming, your response to those, and we'll read them as we continue. But right now, it's time to take a look at sports news with Kendall and Yep.
Yeah, thanks, Elvis. Very good morning to you. If you've just joined us here on the Newsroom show, interesting, we're looking at crime stats, but the Proteas, well, there's a sensational development. I tell you, they've revealed that former West Indies and now, well, he was the current England bowling coach until yesterday, Otis Gibson, well, he's the man to jumpstart the Proteas to the top of the world. Is that right?
That's fair. I think it's fair. Jumpstart would be quite right, because they've been coming along in the fits and starts. I mean, fantastic performances over the last 18 months or so, and then they get to the Champions Trophy, they struggle, they get to England, they struggle, and kind of get a very patchy record there recently. And Otis Gibson is the man who's been identified as the guy to jumpstart, as you said, the Proteas campaign into the future.
Is there a problem with the fact that he's a bowling coach by trade now, and maybe South Africa needed a guy that can really bring a lot of the young batters through, the likes of Themba Bavuma and so forth? We're coming to the end of an era with regards to great batting.
Yeah, look, absolutely. We are coming to the end of an era in terms of great batting, and a lot of help needs to be done for the Themba Bavuma, given to the Themba Bavumas and then potential all-rounders like Kagiso Rabada. He's a potential all-rounder, that guy. He can hold a bat. And
he's got the quality for sure.
So, but having said that, Otis Gibson in his time was known as an all-rounder. Yes, he's a fantastic fast bowler. I mean, his greatest haul for county cricket was when he got 10 for Durham, and 2007 was considered the greatest single force in county cricket in England at that time. So, yeah, you know, he's the real deal. He's a cricketer who's done the deed. He is the same coach, so in 2012, took the West Indies to a T20 World Cup victory. So, yeah, so see some comments on the man as well.
This is an interesting one from Vice, who says, old apartheid cricketers' best mates. He will rope them in. He's easily manipulated. The old guard is back in charge. No transformation. Sad.
Very interesting. You know what, there's obviously a history there. You know what this refers to? I think it refers to the fact that this man is no stranger to South African shores. He played in 1992 to 95 for Border. He's played for Griquas and Wes. He's played for Gauteng as well. And so this man has been in South Africa, and he knows the South African setup very well. To call him easily manipulated, I don't know. It remains to be seen. The man has done the job for the West Indies as well as for England. In fact, he's the one who, in 2014, refused to take up the England head coach job to stay on with the West Indies. It's
tough. It's tough to call it so early. I'm always one to give a man a chance, and well, we know how South Africans are. No chill in Mzansi for sure. And if you don't deliver, and if you go back to the old ways, there will be a groundswell, not just on social media, because South Africans, well, we love our cricket. But anyhow.
People just need to ask Alistair Coetzee what happened when he wasn't delivering right off the bat.
Right off the bat, yeah. All names were doing the rounds and memes. Don't worry about that. Anyhow, Phil is standing by to give us a weather update now.
Yeah, thank you so much. Let's take a look at what's happening in terms of that weather. We're going to start off by taking a look at what we've been seeing over the last 12 hours, which is our satellite loop. Of course, this loop is showing that we're seeing some rather heavy weather on the southern coastlines of South Africa. It's too far south to cause us too much worries. I'll tell you what, we'll get you that weather in just a minute. First of all, stay with us.
SABC is indeed privileged to be invited to this important debate. We're looking forward to ensure that we are able to participate in this important forum. BRICS is an important institution. We're looking forward to share our thoughts in terms of what we think will be a best way for those who are leading the institution to deal with challenges facing the world. We know very well that multilateralism is facing a challenge currently, but we are hoping that leaders of the BRICS nations will ensure that they do what is best, but also to ensure that at the end of the day, it's ordinary people who will benefit from this engagement. And we are looking forward, we're waiting for our guest, and Criselda Louise will indeed give it a go.
Well, hello to you, South Africa, from Beijing, China. This is where SABC News will be participating in a very special broadcast called BRICS Talk, just ahead of the BRICS Summit. We're looking forward to being in this country and giving the South African perspective on an array of issues that are facing the BRICS nations. Let's go towards this direction and meet some of our colleagues who will be participating in that discussion with us. They're right in here, getting ready for the special broadcast, and let's join some of them here. Hello, Peter.
Caught me with my makeup.
Yes, we did. Okay, looking forward to today's broadcast. What in particular do you think you'd want to see come out of this?
Well, we want to see what's if we look at what's going on the world stage right now, we see a lot of instability right now, and I want to see the BRICS countries kind of step up and give a signal, because I think we see a crisis of leadership in the West, particularly in the European Union, and particularly in the United States right now. And BRICS exists for a reason, and I think that reason is coming into being right now. It's just not a convenient club of naysayers, okay? Now it's a club that has significant stakes in the international system, because the system that was developed after the Second World War is basically in tatters. And now we see a new one coming into being, and BRICS has got to step up.
The Law Society has slammed notices sent to 4 universities to jack up standards or risk losing their LLB courses. The Council on Higher Education issued a stern warning to the universities to conform within 6 months.
I think it will affect the university. I think outside the law faculty, there's a funding issue.
It's been 112 years since Enoch Sontonga died as a relatively unknown composer, choir master and teacher. But today his legacy lives on through his greatest composition, Nkosi Sikeleli Afrika.
For all your news updates, stay tuned to Your World from Monday to Sunday.
It's just gone 10 o'clock Central African time. Hello again, everybody. Yes, this is the Newsroom show. I'm with Kendall today, and our focus, of course, is the State of Urban Safety report here in South Africa.
Absolutely. One of those things that a lot of South Africans hold close to their hearts in terms of their experience with crime throughout the country. It's not just here in Johannesburg. We do know, for example, that the national murder rate has increased across the country for the fourth year in a row. And we also know that over 3,000 more murders were recorded than in previous years, in 2011, 2012. And that's why we've got this poll today.
Yeah, the biggest threat to safety, according to you, our viewers, is the following. Is it inadequate policing, poor conviction rates, or brazen criminals? And the highest one rates poor conviction rate, which kind of shifts the focus to the justice system. In some areas, there's a 3% conviction rate, which is a concern. Inadequate policing is not far behind, though, Kendall.
No, 84% saying it's not just about the criminals, it's about how they're dealt with in the system, and that in itself is quite scary. Mitchell's Plain CPF comes in and says, partnership in policing. That's what's required.
Partnership policing, yes. Get the communities involved in the policing process. It makes absolute sense. Partnership policing. Yeah. It's too simplistic to just blame police. We have a lot of fantastic policemen and women out there doing their work every day. Of course, there are a few rotten apples everywhere.
That is true.
Let's take a look at the personalized view of crime. What crimes have you been subjected to recently? And there are lots and lots of these tweets coming in, Kendall.
Yeah, Sindim Talane, just for an example, Sindim Talane says, social media scams are on the rise, so be aware of fake accounts of famous pastors asking for donations for non-existing charity organizations.
Yeah, that's one of those issues that we are dealing with collectively, of course. Online is where a lot of things are happening these days. Of course, Otis Gibson, he's been appointed as Proteas head coach. Kendall, it scores quite a sensation, but it's the worst kept secret in the game for a month now.
Absolutely. You know, Faf du Plessis did mention that, you know, he'd asked around about the potential new coach, Otis Gibson, and a lot of people, oh, so Faf is announcing new coaches these days. Well, you know what? Otis Gibson is a new coach. And Kaitako says it's becoming a disease in South African sports where we have the phobia of local coaches. I thought it was just in football. Why do we take money out of South Africa? Economic transfers.
Economic transformation, he says. Anyhow, keep tweeting us. We've got a lot of issues that we are dealing with here today. Now, let's take a look now at our top stories in news and sport. President Jacob Zuma will later today answer oral questions in the National Assembly. Eskom has until later to clarify its relation with Trillion Capital Holdings. And another ANC councillor has been gunned down in KwaZulu-Natal. Those are your top stories right now. Let's go to Kendall for sports.
Evan, thank you very much. Quite a lot happening in the sports this morning. Good morning to you. This is what we have today.
You look at the makeup of their team, you look at the pitch, especially when...
Cricket. South Africa confirms the cricket world's worst kept secret and reveals England bowling coach Otis Gibson as the man to take over from Russell Domingo as head coach of the Proteas. Bafana Bafana understand the importance of a filled three-point haul in Cape Verde in the World Cup qualifying campaign.
So we're not going to go for a point, we're going to go for a win.
And with authority, Venus Williams is through to the third round of the U.S. Open.
Venus Williams' fairy tale continues as she eases through to the third round of the US Open in straight sets. I'll also be having a chat with Lunga Kupiso about Otis Gibson coming in as the man to take over from Russell Domingo across all three formats. Make sure you stick around for that around about 10:40. Do stay with Eben as he's got the news.
Yeah, thank you, Kendall. Very good morning. If you have just joined us, our top story right now is that President Jacob Zuma will later today respond to questions for oral reply in the National Assembly in Parliament in Cape Town. Now, amongst the issues the President is expected to respond to are questions on the recent G20 summit that, of course, took place in July, as well as the impact of the Siyatlola presidential program and other monitoring mechanisms in our communities. The state of the country's SOEs is also expected to be high on the agenda. This against the backdrop of what is happening at Eskom, yet the SABC, SAA, as well as other state-owned institutions. Meanwhile, EFF leader Julius Malema says they've reconsidered their decision to boycott parliamentary sittings featuring President Jacob Zuma. Malema says they will attend the president's oral reply session this afternoon.
We'll be reminding him that you have left the office long time ago. You are no longer saving our people. You are saving your own family, and you are even trying to secure it even for the future when you are not there. That's why everything else, it should be in your family, and everything else should be somehow related to the Zumas. So that's what we'll be doing. We'll be doing our job tomorrow, holding the executive accountable.
Eskom has until later today to heed Public Enterprises Minister Lynn Brown's instruction to clarify its relation with Trillion Capital Holdings. The company is linked to the controversial Gupta family as well as consultancy McKinsey. Brown gave Eskom a 48-hour deadline after it admitted that it lied about paying more than 1.5 billion rand to Trillion and McKinsey. Initially, the power utility claimed that the payments were above board following advocate Jeff Budlander's release of a damning report into Trillion. However, on Monday, Eskom was forced to concede that global management consultancy Oliver Wyman had concluded that the payments were based on prudent cost incurred and value created. And that had in fact red flagged the payments and recommended a legal review of all these transactions. Another ANC councillor has been gunned down in KwaZulu-Natal. Police say Kwazikwake Mkize was attacked by unknown assailants in the Mkambatini Camperdown area outside of Durban last night. He was shot outside the gate of his home after attending a community meeting. The South African Local Government Association said earlier this week that internal party political squabbles were among the main causes of political killings in the province. 5 association officials appeared before the Murani Commission that is investigating political killings in KwaZulu-Natal. The Hawks have asked former Finance Minister Trevor Manuel to provide affidavits on the creation of a special investigative unit in the South African Revenue Service that allegedly spied on politicians. The unit says it wants to finalize this investigation. Before President Jacob Zuma fired him as finance minister in March, Pravin Gordhan said the tax agency unit set up when he was head of SARS acted within its mandate. Gordhan, opposition parties and civil society groups say the probe is politically motivated. Meanwhile, the Hawks have revealed that they are finally probing the lavish Sun City Gupta wedding. Acting Hawks head Lieutenant General Yolisa Matakata has confirmed that the Special Investigative Unit is investigating charges laid by the Democratic Alliance against Mineral Resources Minister Mosebenzi Zwane and the Guptas. The opulent 2013 wedding is said to have been funded by taxpayers' money during Zwane's tenure as the Free State Agriculture MEC, when he allegedly authorized 184 million rand towards the glittering occasion. The details were revealed in the so-called Gupta emails. The DA then laid charges including racketeering and money laundering. The acting Hawks head confirmed the investigation before Parliament's Standing Committee on Finance. Now, sources close to the SABC in Lesotho say former Deputy Prime Minister Moteshwa Metsing may have skipped the country. Tensions have been building in Lesotho since the recent arrest of the former Minister of Defence, Tseliso Mokosi, over the killing of a policeman in 2016. His body was found earlier this month. Well, just an apology. It seems as if that clip has no audio on it at all. We'll try and fix it and get back to you after a short break.
I think winter is definitely one of those seasons where you can really show off your sartorial choices. You can start from a single layer of a shirt, actually starting with thermals, build it up with the shirts. You can have beautiful knits over the shirts, like we've done with Jade.
This film tells the story of a very, very significant political figure in the struggle for freedom in South Africa, who happened to be a woman. She was Nelson Mandela's wife.
The exhibition is an exploration into black femininity. Tabitha is a woman of color, and she is exploring the historical exploitation of the black female body.
Newtown Junction Mall hosted an epic contest in the cold where 3 top South African graffiti artists battled it out for the opportunity to become the Newtown Graffiti Face-Off Master.
For your weekly dose of entertainment news, tune into Trends every Saturday from 12 to 1.
Welcome back. Time for us to continue with our theme for today. Of course, we're talking about the recent crime survey. Now, according to those numbers, a car is hijacked every 32 minutes in South Africa. Yes, this is according to statistics released by the South African Police Services earlier this year. Nearly 13,000 vehicles were hijacked in South Africa between the period of April and December of 2016. Now, that's a 14.9% increase on the previous year, 2015-16. Earlier in 2017, Wheels 24 reported that more than 1,400 vehicles were hijacked. Now, overall, hijacked vehicles reported to the police from 2012 to 2016 has seen an increase from 80.6% to 86.9%. In studio, we have Reno Skutter, who's the Managing Director of Proactive SA, a company that helps, notifies and distributes information of stolen or hijacked vehicles to security companies in South Africa. Before we talk to Reno, let's just take a look at this shocking video of how an attempted hijack went down.
Images.
Chilling. Yes, it affected one of the family members of one of our very own crew members, one of our own team here at Newsroom. That's how a hijack goes down. Fortunately, the young lady in question, well, she's okay. Now, Reino's here to talk to us about that kind of situation and with regards to how safe our cities are right now with regards to hijacking. The numbers don't lie, it's on the increase, am I right?
Definitely. What we've picked up since 2011, there's been a marginal increase of about 55% from 2011 up to date. So where the lowest point was in 2011 and the highest point last year was 14,602, when we're still currently waiting for the new statistics to be released.
Why are hijackings becoming more increasing? Is it more difficult to steal cars? Is that part of the reason?
That's correct. Back in the day, it was easier to hijack a vehicle or to hotwire a vehicle rather than hijack a vehicle. With the security increases on vehicles, security features on it, you need your key, obviously, to operate the vehicle. There's chip keys that need to be used. So it's easier to hijack a vehicle than to steal a vehicle. The older models are being hotwired, where the new models, unfortunately, is not as easy.
Yeah, the car's a computer now, so you need to kind of have all the tools to operate that. But what's the kind of modus operandi? Is it still the same? People are being followed home from malls and that kind of thing, or are these guys updating the way they work?
Definitely. It's becoming more of a business for them. There's a market for theft or hijacked vehicles, and it's estimated between 8.5 billion to 9 billion per year, which the economy we're losing. That still excludes what the impact of stolen or hijacked vehicles are after market, which they use the vehicles for cash and transit heist or break-ins, thefts, armed robberies. So that's just the market, and we work that out with the South African Insurance Crime Bureau, where it's estimated that 57.2% of vehicles go into bordering countries, and the recovery rates are about 40 to 50%, and that can be due to a vehicle being hijacked or stolen to commit another form of crime. So by getting intelligence out of stolen or hijacked vehicles has a huge impact on other forms of crime.
So the main storyline behind all of this is the fact that there's a market in our neighboring countries for cars stolen here. We live in the time of SADC. Why don't we cooperate a little bit better with other policing units?
There is a cooperation between all of them. There's MOUs in place with bordering countries. There's quite a few vehicles that have been picked up from borders. But at the end of the day, we need to start using technology more in our advantage against these criminals. In the past, it was not as in your face, CCTV cameras on the borders. We need to make use of those technologies and let it play in our favor. And what we've seen is the security companies are starting to work more hand in hand with SAPS members and with law enforcement, which plays into our favor.
We talk about other countries. Of course, we live in the time of satellite technology, and we can trace most of the cars that have been stolen, especially the modern cars, can be traced all over. Which are the countries that receive the most South African vehicles, if we can put it like that?
Well, mostly through the Mozambique border, and then they get exported, the higher end vehicles get exported into Asia, into the Middle East, because there's a market for it. But if we just come back as well, we've got a local market of about 36 to 37% that gets filtered back into our industry or into our market, where they use crashed vehicles or written off vehicles, and they take those VIN numbers, put it on stolen or hijacked vehicles, and it just gets filtered back into our market.
And is there a corruption element within, as we see within everything?
On Facebook yesterday, there's been 1,000 blank Inatus forms that was stolen, which means that a vehicle can be registered even prior to it being stolen. So organized crime of stolen and hijacked vehicles are definitely on the increase. It's now being done with military precision. They have all the documentation even before they steal or hijack a vehicle, make, model and color.
So they would make, model and color and then go steal that specific vehicle.
Exactly.
So very sophisticated. The number says there on the screen, every 32 minutes a car is hijacked in South Africa. Is it reaching crisis proportions? Is it reaching out of control status?
I think it has been for quite a while. Our country is bleeding just due to crime. We're living in fear constantly. And it's time for us as a community as well as South Africans to stand together and not just push it over to the SAPS or the government, but it's all our responsibility to be able to fight crime together.
And what about the levels of violence with hijackings? Do we still see people being killed for vehicles, shootings, that kind of thing?
It does happen. We must need to take in consideration that hijackers are as nervous as the person being hijacked. So any sudden movements will trigger thinking that somebody's reaching for a firearm. So our suggestion is to keep your hands visible at all times and keep it calm as much as possible. You're nervous, they're nervous. So move them away from the person, create space and time as quickly as possible. And don't make any sudden movements. It's not worth your life.
Well, Rainer, thanks for joining us today. Rainer Skutte talking to us about hijacking. Yes, a car is hijacked every 32 minutes here in South Africa. It is a crisis. He's the managing director of Proactive South Africa. Of course, they deal with, well, information that they distribute to security companies here in South Africa about how to look at the numbers, but also how to deal with the problem. We're going to take a short commercial break. When we come back, well, we'll look at a little bit more of the issues we deal with. Violence, we'll talk to the Center for the Study of Violence and Reconciliation here in South Africa after this break.
Today on Rights and Recourse, we will unpack the new traditional court model.
The idea of the bill is not to overregulate, to basically set the principles.
The most important aspect of this bill is that it understands that customary law by its nature is consensual, that I have a right to affiliate, I have a right therefore to opt in, and I have a right to opt out.
The opt-out provision is basically one that you've got to respect the court in the sense of if you've been summoned, you've got to tell the clerk of the court at least that you're not willing to attend.
The challenge that I would like to throw to the Department of Justice, it has to come up with mechanisms of ensuring that people who exercise their right to opt out or to opt in are not in any way victimized.
Hashtag Rights with Dumila Matez on legal issues every Sunday at 2 o'clock Central African Time.
What guides us? What leads us forward? Is it the words of our sacred texts? Is it the actions of our people? Or the voices of our citizens? Your country is guided by the voices of its people, and your broadcaster is dependent on your voice to guide it. Get your copy of the SABC's editorial policy and have your say.
Welcome back. You're watching News with me on SABC News. Now, of course, we're dealing with crime here today. Now, the Center for the Study of Violence and Reconciliation is an innovator in preventing violence and building peaceful societies. The Center adopts a multidisciplinary approach to try and understand and prevent violence, heal the effects thereof, and build sustainable peace, both locally, continentally, and then in the wider world. Now, in studio, we have a researcher from the Center for the Study of Violence and Reconciliation, Selby Qinwa. Very good morning to you, Selby. Thanks for being with us.
Morning, Sene. How are you?
You've seen the report of what's happening in our inner cities. Just give us your idea how you guys are thinking with regards to some of the numbers that are coming out of the report.
Firstly, as the Center for the Study of Violence and Reconciliation, were quite alarmed in the report itself in relation to the statistics, because they're beginning to show the extent to which the levels of crime in South Africa are escalating. And to extend that connected approach to deal with these drivers of violence. I think collectively as a country we need to begin to design strategies that are geared towards addressing such challenges.
You talk about the drivers of violence, and I've, of course, spoken about a range of them today, but what do you guys see as the drivers of violence here in South Africa?
There's the multi-dimension kind of drivers of violence, one of whom is the issue of poverty, issue of inequality, unemployment. So those are the critical factors that drive one to commit crime. So those are the structural one. But also at the individual level, there are issues that, for instance, families, the disjuncture amongst our families, issues of drug and substance abuse amongst our youth, and all of that. So those are some of the things that as SVR we're beginning to look at. But broadly speaking, as the center, in terms of our research, we're focusing on 4 themes in terms of the drivers of violence. One of whom is the collective violence. Collective violence in this case, you'll talk about taxi violence, when or protest. There's a transitional justice violence, when the country is in transition. You speak about the other one is gender-based violence.
Yeah.
I think
which is epidemic.
Which is very epidemic crisis then. That one.
We're running a poll today. We're putting a poll up, as we always do, to our viewers to see how our viewers are thinking with regards to what are the threats to safety here in South Africa. What are the threats to safety? Now, here we've got the following. The biggest threat to safety is inadequate policing, poor conviction rates, or brazen criminals. Now, the majority are saying poor conviction rate is a problem, which focuses on our courts, the fact that for some crimes, conviction rates can be as low as 3%. Criminals are often back on the streets. And inadequate policing is the other one. How do you guys view those two scenarios when we talk about inadequate policing and the poor conviction rates?
Sometimes perception and reality in this case. Clearly, the question of policing has got its own challenge. Police officials also have got their own challenges. Issues of human resource, issues of capacity, and so forth and so on. So they might, be able to arrest criminals, but when they go to justice, in terms of the true conviction and all of that. But as we know, we're a constitutional democracy, and therefore, any person is presumed innocent until proven guilty. And if there's no evidence in many instances, so this perception they get, to be spoken about, to say that this person is, there's no conviction here and so forth and so on. So those are some of the things that, so the justice system in this case needs to be strengthened, but also as communities, our approach, in fact, as CSFR, we say communities are at the root cause, at the root level where policing can, be undertaken. Because once we have communities working together with police, that will sort of reduce crime rates in the country.
Are our communities supporting criminals and criminalities? Are they buying stolen goods and so forth?
In certain instances, yes. But we cannot necessarily have a blanket approach to say all communities. But in certain instances, yes, precisely because of what we've spoken about earlier on, issues of unemployment, lack of economic opportunities. And as a result, people would go for cheap, cheap goods and so forth and so on. So they do. That does happen. So we need communities to work together with policing. That's why, for instance, we say strategies such as your community policy forum, your ward committees or street committees needs to be there to be strengthened, to be able to work democratically, to work with our justice clusters.
The impact of these violent crimes and violent scenes? What is the impact on the population, according to you guys?
The first thing that the impact that these crimes have in terms of is that they're beginning to tap into our tax base, because as you would know, once convicted, they need to go to jail and they will have to get meals, and that begins to, the government would have to deviate in terms of its budget, you know, and to deal with other issues like education, housing, and so forth and so on. That's the first thing. The other impact that it does is that issues of tourism as a country, you know, we're supposed to be tourist. One of the critical area skills that as a country we need is issues of tourism and hospitality. That also will have an impact, you know. The other thing that it may have an impact on is the level of growth. In terms of the migration patterns that needs to be strengthened as a country. So those are some of the things that we...
In conclusion, is it nice to be a criminal in South Africa?
No, not necessarily. I don't think so. I don't think so. I think as a country we need to collectively sit down and deal with this issue. But I don't think that it's nice to be a criminal. Because I've never been one, so I wouldn't have...
I'm glad that you're not. Selby, thank you for coming in today. It's interesting, the numbers don't lie, of course. Selby is a researcher from the Center for the Study of Violence and Reconciliation here in South Africa. Selby Klinwa joining us today to talk about, well, the concerns that we all have about escalating numbers. He says it's not nice to be a criminal in South Africa. You guys are telling me something different on social media. They say, well, if they catch you, you get 3 meals a day, room and board, and it's kind of easy. Anyhow, let's look at some of the positives. Thanks, Selby. Now, the Chatsworth Community Policing Forum has an office situated at the Chatsworth South African Police Services station. Now, last year, the forum, or the CPF as we all know it, was awarded the title of Community Police Forum of the Year. That's from the KwaZulu-Natal Provincial Commissioner's Excellence Awards. The forum was chosen from more than 184 community policing forums in the province of KwaZulu-Natal. Now, we have with us the chairperson, Mr. Jake Singh. Now, he is in our Durban studio. Jake, a very good morning to you, and thanks for being with us.
Thank you. Good morning. Nice to be here.
Jakes, I don't know if you've just watched the interview I did with Selby. I asked him if it's nice to be a criminal in South Africa. He gave me a little bit of a laugh and he said no. What do you think?
Well, he's definitely right. We don't want to be a criminal.
Jakes, you guys have done you've done great work with the CPF there in Chatsworth. Just tell us about how you've gone about doing your business there and managed to bring the levels of crime down in the community.
Well, our year 2017 was in terms of establishing sub-forums where we never had, and street committees and neighborhood watch. Now, this has really brought the serious crime down. But our main concern is also the theft of motor vehicle. Our hijacking has come down because of the visibility in our streets and roads. But yes, the concern is theft of motor vehicle, which we are addressing. But one has to also take cognizance of the theft of motor vehicle is not only happening at the residential areas, because we blame the residential areas in terms of the environmental design of our areas. But at public places, for example, religious institutes, open spaces, like grounds, like other gatherings as well, where we are crying aloud to community when they're having any type of functions, events, please also cater for extra security and extra car guards. So that will actually eliminate the theft of motor vehicle.
You talk about activism then, and it seems like it's important for community members, people who live in communities, to be active in the protection and bringing crime down in their communities. Is that true?
Yes, that's true, but we also still have the apathy, and people are quite content if nothing happened to them. Yes, we still cry aloud for all the residents to be part of our community policing sub-forums in the area. But remember, in Chatsworth, we have 12 sub-forums. And those sub-forums, without failure, They have monthly meeting every month. And, you know, we still urge community to attend. Now, the forum is not a talk shop. You know, we give out the hotspot areas to the residents or the community, and we tell them where's the hotspot area. So it empowers you in terms of where you got to be and the times and things like that. There's nothing else. Our function at the CPF is just the ear and eye, not to chase and catch criminals.
You're based at the SAPS. You have an office at the SAPS. How does that help with the work or that you guys are trying to do, the fact that you have the support of the SAPS as well?
Well, we have a very good support with SAPS. And yes, the office helps us a lot in terms of, you know, people comes with various type of complaints, and they come with various types of concerns. You know, sometimes the CPF with the partners of SAPS is not just about crime. You know, the issues that we encounter, because you must remember, we are the only forum that has monthly meeting. And, you know, we'd be surprised that the community brings in problems or concerns to the forum is not even criminal related. But because of the goodness of the passion that we have, we really don't chase them away. We bring them and we see how best we can help them, and then after we direct them to the relevant stakeholders.
It sounds like the communities are in need of therapy a little bit as well from what the work that you guys are doing. Is it a question that communities need a place or an avenue that they can go and talk to their problems about? What are some of those problems that they come to you with?
Well, you see, one of our biggest crime is social crime. Now, the people only think that crime is committed by criminals. One of our major problems is social crime. Now, social crime can be anything from a domestic issue or unrelated to related issues, for example, like drugs and alcohol. And now these criminals also stem out of the social activities, and then they commit crime as well.
Now, I see that you've met with the Department of Transport as well there to talk about issues or the growing security threat with regards to the taxi industry there in the community. Just tell us about that threat firstly, and then the discussions that you've had with the transport ministry.
Yeah, you see, there's a lot of open spaces that we saw in Chatsworth, and then then various taxi associations that came into Chatsworth. My main purpose of meeting them was, as long as those open spaces and those taxi ranks is not only serviced by the taxi owners of Chatsworth, as long as we don't have any criminal activities, we don't have any fights or anything that's going to actually endanger our community. And then we also work very, very closely with the Chatsworth Taxi Association, because they are one of the main source of commuters that people take. And yes, we have a cordial relationship with them.
In conclusion, Jakes, if you had any advice for other communities in South Africa, what would that advice be with regards to bringing down crime?
Well, my main focus of advice is join your local sub-forums. Obviously, your CPF is established by the station commander of your station. Then one of the functions is to go in areas and establish sub-forum. Join your sub-forum. It's all free. We are all volunteers. We don't get paid. And because of the passion we have, and this really proves that it really brings crime down. And I just want to add one more thing, is Chatsworth at one time was a predominantly an Indian area. It's no more. Chatsworth has grown from a population of about 150,000 people to about 600,000-700,000. So our area of policing and sending a message out is vast. But we are winning, but as with complete community involvement, yes, we will eradicate crime completely.
Jakes, thank you very much for joining us. That's Jakes Singh. He's the chairperson of the Community Policing Forum in Chatsworth. They just won an award from the province there for the wonderful work that they've done in bringing the crime levels down in the area. That is Chatsworth, of course. And his advice is a simple one. We all need to be activists in our own communities. We have to get involved. We have to do a little bit of free volunteer work and have that passion to keep your communities and your children safe. It's really as simple as that. We're going to take a short little break now. You're watching the Newsroom show. After this break, we'll have a complete sports roundup with the new Proteas coach with Kendall Makamate.
Africans are increasingly using digital platforms for life, work and play.
Information is key for us. We live in an information age. We live in the digital age.
I'm mostly on WhatsApp because not all my friends have iPhones, so they don't have FaceTime.
On Network, we tell you about Africa's technology and social media landscape. And some here are using the internet to raise political concerns.
Some of the exposés on political issues come from what we call your diasporic online media.
Africans are also using technology to create. For African technology and social media news, join me, Phumelele Zondi, on Network every Sunday at 9 p.m.
Good morning, welcome back. My name is Kendall Makamate, and we start off the sports bulletin actually just focusing mostly on what's happening in the world of cricket, where Cricket South Africa has finally announced the appointment of West Indian Otis Gibson as head coach of the Proteas national team across all three formats of the game. Now, Otis's contract will run from mid-September when he starts preparing the squad for the home series against Bangladesh until the end of the ICC World Cup in halfway through the year 2019. Gibson is currently the bowling coach of the England Test team and has previously served as head coach of the West Indies. As a player, the 48-year-old had a distinguished career for the West Indies, representing them in 2 Test matches, the second of which was the New Year Test at Newlands in 1999. He also played in 15 ODIs as an all-rounder between the years 1995 and 1999. And Gibson is no stranger to South African cricket, as he once had spells with Border, Gauteng and Northern Cape cricket, which was known as Griqualand West at that time, as well as several England counties. Now, CSA also announced that Russell Domingo will now become head coach of the South Africa A-side, while the current incumbent Shukri Conrad will return to his previous full-time position as head coach of the Power Aid National Academy. Now, with that said, let's talk to Lunga Kupiso about the new man at the helm of South African cricket. Good morning.
Thank you for the invite.
Lunga, here's the thing. Are you surprised at all that Otis Gibson was the man that was chosen to do this?
Well, it's been the worst kept secret. So in that fact, it's no surprise. But in as far as the confirmation of the appointment and the reasonings behind the appointment, it is quite a shocker of a decision. And if you're looking at the progression of South African cricket and where Cricket South Africa says it wants to take South African cricket, and if you try and align that vision or that communicated vision with this decision, it certainly is a surprise.
Tell us a bit more about what you just said.
Well, Cricket South Africa is big on developing cricket. So they're big on grassroots development, and grassroots development does not only focus on players, it also focuses on coaches, it also focuses scoring, on umpiring, just to make sure that as South Africa we produce internationally acclaimed professionals, whether be it players, whether be it in the supporting staff environment. Appointing Otis Gibson and overlooking a candidate like Jeffrey Toyana, for me, doesn't make sense, and it also does send out a negative message to the rest of the world about the trust that Cricket South Africa has on their structures. What is Jeffrey Toyana lacking that Otis Gibson is bringing? And the reasons that the CEO of Cricket South Africa gave yesterday, for me, were boxes that Jeffrey Toyana ticked. So the only thing that Jeffrey Toyana cannot tick, and he will never be able to tick in his life, is the fact that he's South African and he's not an international player. Other than that, the CEO stated that Otis Gibson has a relationship with the players. And he then went on to substantiate that, and he said he has a relationship at least with ex-international players. Ex-international players don't matter right now in the cricket, in the Proteas setup. It's current players, and those current players have a relationship with Jeffrey Toyana. Christopher Morris, we've been through this. Christopher Morris came through Jeffrey Toyana. Quinton de Kock came through Jeffrey Toyana. Temba Bavuma came through Jeffrey Toyana. These are all players that are either playing Test, T20 and ODI, or just Test cricket, and they've been through Jeffrey Toyana. Kagiso Rabada is still with Jeffrey Toyana. So what exactly is he lacking that Otis Gibson is going to bring? So already this is a negative start for Otis Gibson. Yeah. And for me, I do not feel that he understands the requirements and the needs of South African sports. What am I talking about? Transformation, those targets. Is this somebody that's going to come in and say, I'm just here to win at whatever cost? Or is this somebody that's going to say, okay, I understand the history of the country, even though I do not have a relationship with it. I understand the history and where it wants to go, so selection will be based on. But that's going to be a difficult task. If Gary Kirsten couldn't coach with that in mind, and other coaches have failed, coaches that are from South Africa, yes. How is he going to relate, and how is he going to improve the situation?
Are you saying never mind the fact that he's actually spent quite some time playing here? He played for Border in 1992 already. He was playing for Border. He played for Griekenland. He's played for Gauteng in those formative years of the new era in South African cricket. Are you saying that really doesn't make a difference?
It doesn't faze me. It really doesn't faze me. What do we want to do as South African cricket? Do we want to keep on pumping international players, international ex-players to come into the country and try and salvage the situation? And what annoys the most out of this is that Cricket South Africa praises Jeffrey Toyana. Last year they sent him to LA to be in and amongst the likes of Carlo Ancelotti. Those are big managers, club managers in and around sporting franchises. Yeah. But when it's time to trust him at the job, they don't give him that opportunity. And there's this misconception that in South Africa, if you want to get results, you can appoint local. But if you want to have somebody who's going to understand transformation and take the team forward in as far as meeting those targets, then you can go local. Nobody ever gave Russell Domingo the opportunity or ever thought Russell Domingo would actually go on to do well with the Proteas. But they understood that naturally he's the next in line, purely because he understands the transformation targets and he understands what it means in South Africa to be a black sports player.
All right. Let's look a little bit about what Otis Gibson does bring, because some of the armory that Cricket South Africa believe that this man brings is his time as a player. Yeah. His time as a coach as well. We've got some stats that we'll put together, and let's see how you talk to this. Yes, I understand that you've actually you say, look, this doesn't actually quite cut the grade. That there's a lot more to talk about with regards to what should be looked at in a coach. But this man has taken the West Indies with a mediocre side. He's taken the West Indies, and why we're looking at Bafana Bafana right now, we need to be looking at Jeffrey Toyana and his stats. He's taken the West Indies side to a win in 2012 in the T20 World Cup. He's played, he was in 2007, was considered one of the best, in fact, the single most effective force in county cricket at that time. There is England bowling coach. He's coached the northwest region of England. He's coached the West Indies. He's a man who does know his cricket, and he does well. So in his own right, would you agree that this man has got the wherewithal and the credibility to be a national coach anywhere in the world?
Well, he's going to prove that he's a credible coach. He's going to prove time and time again that he is a great coach. I mean, he took West Indies. They were never a strong West Indian side when they went on to win. And he took them there. He got offered that head coach role with England, and he said, look, right now I want to focus on the bowling aspect of coaching so I can be an all-rounded cricketing coach. So in as far as his coaching abilities, nobody can question that. What we are questioning right now is the appointment. Yeah. What is the appointment? Where is it taking Cricket South Africa right now? Has Cricket South Africa changed its vision of you know, investing itself wholeheartedly on grassroots development. And grassroots development does not only focus on players, it must also focus on coaches, because as a South African coach, you are developed through the system. Where is the pinnacle?
Understood.
Where is the cherry on top as a coach? So what's next for Jeffrey Toyana? Must he go and look for opportunities elsewhere? Is that what Cricket South Africa is saying? Wandile Maketa down in East London. So right now, this sets a precedent that if Otis Gibson doesn't succeed, we can expect that Mark Butcher will be appointed as a coach, because experience and understanding within an international setup is not really that important. We're looking at somebody who's played the game at an international level, somebody who's got relationships with ex-players. That's what the CEO said.
Okay.
Otis Gibson has relationships with ex-players. For me, that doesn't make sense.
I hear you.
But if you look at those stats, certainly
I hear you, and I think it's established. I think that's it's key. Two key questions. What happens to Jeffrey Toyana? What does he do now? Firstly. Secondly, has CSA changed its vision? Very important question, which I'd love to get a response on from CSA on. Now, lastly but not leastly, the things that Otis Gibson needs to focus on right now. Give me the two key things that he needs to focus on. We've got just about a minute.
Cool. So he must sort out who is he going to trust as a coach in that opening partnership. Is he giving Dean Elgar time to continue as he has done, or is he going to look for a new betting partnership to open and take them on and give them time to build up towards whatever vision he has? Then he must look at the spine of the team. Who's going to be in the spine of the team? What is going to be the setup? Quinton de Kock moving up and down 4-3-2-5 is nonsense. So he must quickly address that, and then he must look at who is he going to trust as an all-rounder in the side, or he doesn't believe in an all-rounder. Then he must go and find that extra bowler.
He must also incorporate A.B. de Villiers.
A.B. de Villiers in the picture. Is he going to take A.B. de Villiers? How will he deal with that ego? Because he is a bit of a hard coach, and the West Indian ex-players, big names, sometimes say he's a little bit too hard. How is he going to handle that situation? And then is Dale Steyn going to make his way back into the side, or is he going to give an opportunity to an upcoming youngster that's going to be one for the future? Because if you're looking at 2019 World Cup, is Dale Steyn going to make it to the 2019 World Cup, or are you rather going to invest in a youngster that's going to go there? And then also, all of those decisions now need to be based in and around meeting targets.
Lunga Kupiso, always straight talking, always hard facts, and definitely backing up all your opinions, and really appreciate your time once again and your very refreshing view on the matter.
Thanks, Kendall.
There you have it, Lunga Kupiso, cricket analyst, taking us through some of what it is that maybe has gone through Cricket SA's thinking process as they chose Otis Gibson ahead of somebody like a Jeffrey Toyana, who seemed like the candidate, the incumbent for the longest time. Moving on to other sporting stories, Bafana Bafana have arrived in Cape Verde for their first leg Russia 2018 World Cup qualifier match on Friday evening. Stuart Baxter and his charges are currently tied at the top of Group D alongside Burkina Faso. Now, with only the group winner granted automatic qualifications for Russia, nothing but victory in the remaining 4 matches will secure them a spot at next year's World Cup. Now, Bafana Bafana's road to Russia will begin with a tough test at the AstroTurf surface in Praia. Already, Coach Stuart Baxter describes the surface as not the best. The national team travelled to the island off the coast of West Africa, where that a win against Cabo Verde at the 15,000-seater Estadio Nacional de Cabo Verde on Friday night, then again on Durban on Tuesday, will leave Bafana in the driving seat to reach Russia 2018. South Africa have only qualified for 2 World Cup finals. This is back in 1998 and then again 4 years later in 2002. And of course, they did appear as hosts in 2010. Prior to that, they'd missed the boat in 94, 2006 and 2014. 2 victories in the next 2 matches will all but seal them passage to Russia.
Things that we had going for us when we got to the Nigeria game was the fact that there was such a buzz, there was such a good vibe and a positive buzz and a positive feel. So I think looking at that, we were trying to promote that same sort of feeling. It's been very hot, it's been a long trip, and so the start of the training this morning was a little bit, let's say, not sloppy, but it was a little bit subdued. But very quickly you saw that competitive spirit coming out, and I think at the finish of training, even though it was hot, we were playing some very good football. I think every game now in World Cup qualifiers is very important, and I think if you look at this game isolated, it's a game that we think we have a good chance of winning. So we're not going to go for a point, we're going to go for a win. And in terms of what it means for the group, you never know. You never know the other results. You know, you tend to overemphasise the importance of this game, and then you don't get a result, and then suddenly you look at the other one, you think, blimey neck, we're still back, we're still in the picture. So I think we have to concentrate 100% here and now. This is the only game on the planet for us. Minute by minute, bite them off, come away with the win, and then we'll see what it has for implications in the bigger picture. But let's concentrate on winning this one without thinking of the implications. I can't say if Senegal are going to beat Burkina Faso or Burkina Faso are going to draw, so I don't know how much it will set the tone, you know. And if we win this and we only take a point at home, then we throw it away, you know. So every game is vital now. So we need to just be here and now, super present, and make sure that we bite off this next challenge, which is Cape Verde.
The atmosphere has been good. It's, of course, I missed out on the Nigeria game, but the boys managed to get a good result. They look very well structured and got a good, you know, put in a good performance. So hopefully they can take all the good things they did in that game, and we can continue doing the good work. We're playing away from home, play effectively, get the result. Because the main goal is the World Cup in Russia, so results are the most important thing.
It's always good to be back with the national team. Obviously we had a wonderful victory last time, so the mood in the camp has really continued from our victory in Nigeria. It's great to see all the boys get us back together, and today was our first full training session together, and we're obviously opening up our legs from a long flight and getting used to the conditions, but it's good to be here early, and by the time Friday comes around we'll be more than ready. It's a huge game. I think we've put ourselves in a great position in the group, and now we have to capitalise on that. We've got Cape Verde home and away. They're currently at the bottom with nothing to lose, so we know we're going to face a very difficult team, especially in their own backyard, and we'll have to be ready for a tough game, but we're in a great position and we want to capitalise on where we are.
In the meantime, the Minister of Sports and Recreation, Thulas Nxesi, has urged Bafana players to do their best and not disappoint South Africans when they play against Cape Verde. Minister Nxesi also says Cape Verde should not be undermined as they've got nothing to lose, which does make them an incredibly dangerous side.
The fact that we are here means you are all winners. You have been selected to play at the highest level, and now you represent your country. It's not about you as an individual. You are representing a country. That's a heavy responsibility. That is an honor, but also, as I say, a heavy responsibility. On Friday, there will be millions of people watching back home. They will be cheering you on, willing you to win, and don't disappoint them. And I have faith that you can do it.
That's it. That's where we're going to leave it for now. We've got a whole lot more for you to bring you in the next hour. At about 11:35, we'll be bringing you exactly what's happening with the Comrades Marathon, which is starting up shortly, as well as what's happening with the tennis. The US Open is in full swing. Everybody trying to get into round 3. Make sure you stay close to us. You are watching Newsroom. We'll take a short break and we'll be back shortly again.
Your evening well informed with primetime news.
Thanks for tuning in. You're watching SABC News Prime. The burning land reform issue was also a point of discussion on the first day.
If you do not have a skills revolution, you will run into the kind of problems that we're having at the moment.
We have funded about 466,000 students, out of about 800,000 students that are in the university system.
South Africa says insufficient electricity and water remains one of the biggest barriers to development and prosperity on the continent.
The top 4 batsmen in the squad, Hashim Amla, Quinton de Kock, Faf du Plessis and AB de Villiers, are certainties in the starting lineup.
I really believe we cover all bases when it comes to spin bowling, seam bowling, proper pace bowling.
and an amazing batting lineup.
Stay tuned every Monday to Sunday from 6 p.m.
Weather seasons. In the spring, seeds take root and vegetation begins to grow. The weather is warmer and often rainy. Animals wake and return from hibernation, often with newborns. In summer, temperatures are hot and sometimes heat waves cause trouble. Maize, groundnuts, and pumpkin farming is best in summer. In the autumn, temperatures cool again, and this is the harvest season for most cultures. In the winter, temperatures are cold with snow, cold fronts, rain, and sometimes gale force winds. This is our normal way of life here in the southernmost tip of Africa, but that's not always the case, as we on occasion have severe weather like heat waves, super strong cyclones, flash floods, tornadoes, droughts, and many more. Our environment is slowly becoming unsustainable to human life due to rising global temperatures. Catch more of this weather and related issues on Whether or Not every Friday at 10 to 5 South African Standard Time.
A very good morning and a warm welcome to the final hour, Jumbo Africa. I'm Elvis Presley.
I'm Kendall Makhamat.
We'll be with you until 12 o'clock. The poll today, we focus on the state of urban safety report in South Africa that indicate that the national murder rate is going up and, of course, crime is increasing, Kendall.
Oh, yes, it is. And we want to find out from you what your thoughts are on the matter, because it's actually been quite interesting how nobody's feeling that much safer anymore. And we've put a poll up for you to try and see if you can interact with us on this. Finding out from you what your thoughts are on the matter. What are the biggest threats to safety, to your safety in today's South Africa? Is it inadequate policing or poor conviction rate or just brazen criminals?
Well, so far, poor conviction rate seems to be outstanding there, 47%, Kendall. That means there's a problem within our courts. 38% are saying it's inadequate policing, and only 15% say the criminals here in South Africa are very brazen.
Elvis, it's clear that South Africans that are actually coming in on this particular poll are saying our justice system is failing us. What's this? 85% saying, you know what, between conviction as well as policing, not happening, not doing the job.
Let's take a look at what you are telling us. Prince Morake says, Cape Town and Nelson Mandela Bay rated the most violent metros. Yes, that's what it says, Prince. Exactly it.
Remember, Marikana says the poor conviction rate and the fact that many cases get postponed numerous times gives him an angry face.
Yes, there you have it. These are some of your comments. Please keep them coming. We'll read them as we continue. But we're staying with the focus because the murder rate, the two most violent cities in South Africa are Cape Town and Nelson Mandela Bay. Can you believe it? Both of which have high levels of gang crimes, I might add, as well. No, that's why we're asking that question.
Yeah, it's fascinating how terrifying these figures make one feel, and when you go to those cities. In fact, even just here though, so Pride Lukoiko has come in and said, you know what, as long as he produces the goods, he's okay. He's talking about, of course, Otis Gibson, which is a question that we're going to get to with regards to what's happening in the sports there. And I do hope that we've got one or two that can talk to this current question about what crimes have you been subjected to recently to make you feel less safe in South Africa?
Because we talked earlier about high walls and people with alarm systems and secure private security, but still the crimes increase. So let's take a look at what you are telling us on the crime issue. What crimes have you been subjected to recently? Well, I was a victim of armed robbery on the N2 in Cape Town, says proudly Koi Koi. On the N2, can you believe it?
Yeah, no, it's quite crazy. Sindim Talani says social media scams are on the rise, so beware of fake accounts. There are pastors. There's a famous pastor asking for donations for non-existing charity organizations, so be aware of that. So it doesn't stop. It's crime that's contact crime, it's crime that's murder, it's crime that's scams on the internet.
It's not just people that's robbing you and grabbing you physically, it's also on the internet. So We're also asking a sports question today. Otis Redding, or was it Otis Gibson?
It's Mr. Gibson, the Barbadian, appointed as the Proteas head coach. And we just had a chat with Lunga Kupiso, one of my more favorite cricket analysts, coming through saying, you know what, this is not the right way for Cricket South Africa to go. But having said that, we want to find out what you've got to say about this appointment.
Well, this is what Bradley Koi says. He says as long as he produced the goods, he's okay. That is now Otis Gibson being appointed the new coach.
And Katako says it's becoming a disease in South African sports. We have a phobia of local coaches. I thought it's just in football. So why are we taking the money out of South Africa? Economic transformation
Questions, Katlejo. Keep them coming. We'll read them as we continue. But right now, let's get down to business and take a look at some of these headlines. The Parliament will be debating the possibility of the DA's request for an early election in 5 days. President Jacob Zuma is expected to face tough questions when he answers the oral questions in the National Assembly. And a second day of interviews to appoint the permanent SABC board has started in Parliament. We'll keep you updated on those stories. But right now, it's time to take a look at what's happening on the sports front with Kendall Makamate.
Elvis, thank you very much. Quite a lot happening. A very interesting day that we wake up to. Quite a lot happening in the SABC board interviews. Very interesting conversations being had there. But the big stories about the Proteas.
There you go.
Now, good morning to you. That's exactly what we're going to be bringing to you in this hour. Stories about this as well as other sports news. And here's what we've got planned for you right now.
You look at the makeup of their team, you look at the pitch, especially when...
Cricket South Africa confirms the cricket world's worst-kept secret and revealed England bowling coach Otis Gibson as the man to take over from Russell Domingo as head coach of the Proteas. And Bafana Bafana understand the importance of a full three-point haul in Cape Verde in their World Cup qualifying campaign.
So we're not going to go for a point, we're going to go for a win.
And with authority, Venus Williams is through to the third round of the U.S. Open.
Venus Williams fairy tale continues as she eases through to the third round of the US Open in straight sets. All this in more detail we'll have for you around about 11:35. To stay with Elvis as he's got the news.
Thank you, Kendall. Parliament will be debating the possibility of early elections on the 5th of September. This follows the DA's call for the 5th Parliament to be dissolved to make way for fresh national elections. The party argues that the vote on the motion of no confidence in President Jacob Zuma earlier this month showed that many ruling party MPs are not satisfied with their leadership either. The Constitution does provide for early elections after 3 years, and it had passed since the last election. But the ANC and most opposition parties have already rejected the idea. Meanwhile, the President will today respond to questions for oral reply in the National Assembly in Parliament in Cape Town. Among the issues the President is expected to respond to are questions on the recent G20 summit in July, as well as the impact of the Siyahlola presidential program and other monitoring mechanisms on the communities. The state of the country's SOEs is also expected to top the agenda. This against the backdrop of what is happening at the SABC, Eskom, SAA and other state-owned institutions. Meanwhile, the Economic Freedom Fighters leader, Julius Malema, says that they have reconsidered their decision to boycott parliamentary sittings featuring the President Jacob Zuma. Malema says they will attend President Jacob Zuma's oral reply session this afternoon.
We'll be reminding him that you have left the office long time ago. You are no longer saving our people. You are saving your own family, and you are even trying to secure it even for the future when you are not there. That's why everything else, it should be in your family, and everything else should be somehow related to the Zumas. So that's what we'll be doing. We'll be doing our job tomorrow, holding the executive accountable.
Second day of the interviews to appoint the permanent SABC board has started in Parliament. The Portfolio Committee on Communications is expected to interview 12 candidates out of the 24 individuals remaining. Yesterday, the committee had to interview 11 out of the initial 12 candidates after one candidate decided to withdraw. 36 candidates vying for the job were shortlisted. Now, they include 5 members of the interim board being part of the nominated. Eskom has until today to heed Public Enterprise Minister Lynn Brown's instruction to clarify its relation with Trillion Capital Holdings. The company is linked to the controversial Gupta family and consultancy firm McKinsey. Brown gave Eskom a 48-hour deadline after it admitted that it lied about paying more than 1.5 billion rand to Trillion and McKinsey. Initially, the power utility claimed that the payments were above board following advocate Jeff Budlender's release of a damning report into Trillion. However, on Monday, Eskom was forced to concede that the global management consultancy Oliver Wyman had concluded that the payments were based on prudent cost incurred and value created. Wyman had, in fact, red flagged the payments and recommended a legal review of the transactions. Another ANC councillor has been gunned down in KwaZulu-Natal. Police say Kwazikwakwe Mkhize was attacked by unknown assailants in the area of Mkambatini in Camperdown outside Durban last night. He was shot outside the gate of his home after attending a community meeting. The South African Local Government Association, SALGA, said earlier this week that internal party political squabbles were among the main causes of political killings in the province. 5 association officials appeared before the Moerani Commission, which is investigating political killings in KZN. The Hawks have asked the former Finance Minister Trevor Manuel to provide affidavits on the creation of a special investigative unit in the South African Revenue Service that allegedly spied on politicians. The unit says it wants to finalize the investigation before the President Jacob Zuma fired him as the finance minister in March. Pravin Gordhan said the tax agency unit set up when he was head of the SARS acted within its mandate. Gordhan, opposition parties and civil society groups say that the probe is politically motivated. Meanwhile, the Hawks have revealed that they are finally probing the lavish Sun City Gupta wedding. Acting Hawks head Lieutenant General Yolisa Matakata has confirmed that the Special Investigating Unit is investigating the charges laid by the Democratic Alliance against the Mineral Resources Minister Mosebenzi Zwane and the Guptas. The opulent 2013 wedding is said to have been funded by taxpayers' money during Zwane's tenure as the Free State Agriculture MEC, when he allegedly authorized 184 million rand towards the glittering occasion. The details were revealed in the so-called Gupta emails. The DA then laid charges against or including racketeering and money laundering. The acting Hawks head confirmed the investigation before Parliament's Standing Committee on Finance. To the courts now, the man who accused of killing 22-year-old Soweto resident Karabo Mokoena is expected to be back in Johannesburg Magistrates Court today. 27-year-old Sandile Mantswe was supposed to have been formally charged yesterday, but he was not physically present in court. The magistrate indicated that the investigation was complete and the charge sheet had been finalized. Mantswe allegedly murdered and set alight his 22-year-old girlfriend of 7 months. Mokoena was reported missing in April and her photograph circulated on social media. Her charred remains were found in a veld in Lyndhurst in Johannesburg. Mantswe has denied killing her, saying the part-time student committed suicide. He's facing charges of murder and defeating the ends of justice. To Lesotho now, sources close to the SABC in that country say that the former Deputy Prime Minister, Motshajao Metsing, may have skipped the country. Tensions have been building in Lesotho since the recent arrest of the former Minister of Defense, Chaliso Makosi, over the killing of a policeman in 2016. His body was found earlier this month. We'll keep you updated of that story a little bit later. Now, the city of Cape Town and Nelson Mandela Bay are rated as one of the most violent metros in South Africa based on murder rates. Now, this is our focus this morning. This is according to the State of Urban Safety report released last week. The report says that Cape Town has the highest rate of crimes detected through police work. The 9 large urban municipalities analysed in the report is home to about 40% of the residents of South Africa and accounts for most of these violent crimes committed in the country. Now, early on, we talked to a researcher in urban safety at the South African Cities Network, Sipilele Ngubese, on safety in South Africa's 11 cities.
Is South Africa getting safer? I think if we look at it in terms of what the national data is telling us, that's saying that in the last 20 years we've halved our murder rates. In 1994 and 1995, we were at 64 murders per 100,000 people. We are now at 34 murders per 100,000 people. So a big milestone, a big improvement that we've been able to make. But our murder rates still remain at 5 times the global average. So although we've improved, although we've done well over the last 20 years, there's still a long road ahead. And if we break that down to city level, we can then get a clearer picture of exactly what, because national crime data gives us a very general picture of what's going on in terms of crime and violence. But then the research that we've done looking at the state of safety, if aggregated at city level, it gives you a clearer picture. Therefore, you can tell that which cities are performing in different sets of crime and in different crime types. Not necessarily for comparative purposes, but so that cities can tailor their intervention.
It's not a competition. People always see it as a competition. Cape Town, Joburg, Durban, and so forth. The sad reality is, though, that Cape Town is becoming problematic. 40% increase over the last couple of years, that's simply too much. Can it be as simple as saying, as they always say in Cape Town, oh, it's gang activity, or is it a scenario that with rapid urbanization, the city is not coping?
I would say the immediate reaction, as I saw on your poll, a lot of what citizens are feeling is that the police are not doing enough. There's dissatisfaction with police responsiveness and response to these kinds of crimes. But I would say it's microcosmic of what's happening in cities across South Africa. Although Cape Town might be kind of jarring when you look at the numbers, it seems like there's been a dramatic kind of increase in crime, as you say, over the last year particularly. But we tend to look at it in terms of the social. I think it correlates what you saw in your reactions when you looked at the tweets from your viewers, where people are concerned. Like, we've had so many street robberies in my street. It correlates with our research, where although we have the numbers, the hardcore stats, we've also gone into crime hotspots where we've spoken to people and have subjective indicators.
You talk about the street robberies. This is exactly the thing that seems to be happening quite a lot, is that 3-4 guys come, they just, you know, wherever you are on the street, they rob people of everything on the street. I think this is from Port Elizabeth, if I'm not mistaken. Oh, from Durban. No, this is from Durban. But this kind of contact crime, it doesn't receive the priorities of murder and rape and so forth. But the numbers on this is well on the increase, and the streets are becoming less safe. Is that accurate?
In some places, the perceptions of crime and the reality of crime kind of correlate, and I would say that's the case with Cape Town, Nelson Mandela Bay, and so on, where we ask people about their perceptions of crime. People feel like they are overrun with crime. They think about crime at least once every 2 weeks. That's in terms of the kinds of questions we've asked them in our surveys. And there is this feeling, and it may or may not be a reality, that the police are not doing enough. But the argument that we tend to make is that given the unprecedented volumes of violent crime in South Africa, I think a lot has to come together with the policing. In addition to policing, we need to look at social interventions, looking at early childhood development and so on, because our argument is that there's stuff that you honestly can't police.
Inequality is one of those threats, of course. Jobs is another thing. You can go down the list of all the social ills. The one thing that concerns me, though, is that the low conviction rates that we see in our courts. Are you concerned about that, and how do we overcome that kind of thing?
our research, I must say, is at city level, at local government level, dealing with the metros. So I think we craft our thinking and our interventions around enabling local governments, municipalities, particularly the metros, to respond in more measured, more researched ways. So I wouldn't say that our messaging, it considers crime and justice in terms of courts and so on. We deal with, at the local level, enabling local governments, because again, local governments is where it all happens. It's where all delivery happens, and it's where it's the most responsive level of government, and it's the level of action. So that's where we direct our messaging.
If we look at some of the tweets coming in, you'll see that people talk about corruption as another big one, both within the police and other spheres, and that this kind of sets the tone. I know you can't really give me an answer on that, but let me take it to Port Elizabeth, because the friendly city is what it's called. Why are there so many murders being committed in the friendly city?
I think that correlates with our own research, where it says that you have to, there's a lot that goes into people's perceptions of police, and whether people feel that they can report. People feel that police are corrupt. People feel that police side with criminals in a lot of instances. So whether that is perception or reality, we feel that there is a need to address people's relationships with policing, because if responses to crime and violence are going to be happening at community level, it's very important for people to have positive relationships with police and so on.
How do you view activism within communities? Because we see that activism in communities in some areas is bearing fruit. Places like Chatsworth in Durban, the community policing forum's doing quite well. Bonteheuwel in the Cape, where they've managed to turn around a war zone into doing a little bit better, still not ideal. So activism in our communities, how do we get people to participate in their own communities, you think?
For us, I think that is a critical part of turning this tide around. I think community involvement and community activism. So for us, again, it's where we say not everything can be policed. So you need spatial interventions that critically change space, that enables people to be present in public space, because we find that crime keeps people from being in public space. And so if you create a spatial environment that discourages criminal activity and encourages people to be present, eyes on the street and so on. So we feel that is where planners come in, town planners come in to create the kind of spaces, and to say that everybody has a role in the creation of safer cities.
The kind of things we're seeing, which is security companies, private, I think we've got 700 or 900 private security companies in South Africa, are they helping to bring the crime rates down? The numbers haven't come down.
Yes, so we tend to conceptualize that as you need to see the distinction between security and safety. You can take security measures, you can securitize, but that doesn't always translate to safety and safer communities. So that's why we preach social interventions, youth programs, early childhood interventions, and long-term engagement, long-term safety strategies that speak to more than just security, because you can have security that gives you a sense of safety, but that doesn't always translate.
You're telling us let's treat the disease and not the symptoms.
Yes. Yes, yes.
Fantastic. Now, you're putting forward some recommendations, I'm sure. What are those recommendations that you're putting forward? And are you getting the right responses as a group?
I think the Urban Safety Reference Group has been in effect from 2014. I think at city level, in terms of getting cities to start thinking in a more integrated way about safety, I think we've made some headway in that sense. So in terms of our key messaging and some of the recommendations that we make in the report is that city responses must be based on knowledge. So we push that knowledge-based decision-making. We also say that safety is everyone's concern. It's not just a matter of policing. You need your social development practitioners. You need your city planners. It's a spatial thing. It's a social development thing. It's an economic thing. So in addition to hardcore policing and security, conventional security, you need those. So among the recommendations we make is those.
It's about untangling the entire networks that exist to create these fertile grounds for crime to flourish. Thank you for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
I'm Marcelo Torres, and this is SBT, one of the leading TV networks in Brazil.
I am host of the political debate program Crosstalk. I'm very pleased to be with you at this very important event.
We are India's largest 24-hour news network, and I look forward to the opportunity of talking about BRICS.
My name is Criselda Lewis from the South African Broadcasting Corporation. See you in Beijing.
I look forward to welcoming my counterparts from the other BRICS countries in a first ever 5-way televised debate.
He's still going. He pops it up with Sergio Peterson. Easy as that. What a response it is from the Cheetahs. Brilliant score.
Imran Tahir produced a superb performance with the ball. The Proteas leg spinner put his side in the driving seat, scalping 3 wickets for just 18 runs.
Gifton Gope is flying toward third, and he is there with a triple, his first in the big leagues.
It is a Ferrari front row lockout, unless Hamilton can get on pole, and he can't. Ferrari, for the first time since France in 2008, have locked out the front row.
For all your sports news, keep it locked to Sports Live every Saturday and Sunday from 20:30.
Welcome back. Now, media practitioners, academics and civil society leaders from across the continent are gathered in Grahamstown in Eastern Cape over the next 2 days for the 21st edition of Highway Africa, the media conference. Now, this year's edition is themed Media Accountability and Local Governance. Now, this comes shortly after the Auditor General had some disturbing revelations about the state of our local governance in the country. For the latest on the conference, let's now cross to our reporter, Unati Bengose, who's live at the Rhodes University there in Grahamstown. Unati, a very good morning to you and welcome.
Elvis, a very good morning to you too, and a warm welcome to all our SABC News viewers. Indeed, we are coming to you live from Grahamstown. We're at Rhodes University. Like you said, it's the 21st edition of this prestigious event, the Highway Africa Journalism Conference. It is by far the biggest in the continent, the biggest gathering of African journalists. And of course, they are not here just for a talk shop. This is a serious event where they are here to discuss issues pertaining to Africa and how to drive this continent forward using the platform that the media provides. And of course, the theme for this day is media accountability and local governance. And of course, it is something that just about everyone from just about every corner in the African continent can relate to. I mean, it is something that is widely regarded as inaccountability, that is something that is widely regarded as something that stalls the progress of Africa. And of course, what this gathering is about is to capacitate journalists to try and deal with these issues and try to understand issues of budgets even better, and how the local government, the local sphere of government works. And of course, we do believe that after these 2 days, all the journalists will get back to their bases all across the African continent and try to make a difference in order to drive this continent forward. About over 150 delegates are here, and 41 countries are represented, which makes this indeed the premier African Journalism Conference. And of course, they wasted no time delving straight into it. I mean, the issue of accountability was the theme right right at the beginning, I mean, they called upon South Africa's premier investigative unit, which is called Amapungane. I'm sure all those in the media will know about them. They have been making some headways, revealing, I mean, some of the most disturbing of stuff that has to do with governance in this country. And of course, Sam Soul was someone who was doing a presentation here, a very, very moving presentation. And of course, a platform was given to journalists to try and interact with him. And of course, some journalists from all across the continent, particularly those from East Africa, took keen interest in what he had to reveal in his presentation. Of course, you'll understand that the country of Kenya was in the elections not so long ago. And of course, there were some disturbing stories on the lead up and post those elections, which means that, of course, it was bound to generate some interest, particularly from those reporters from the East African region of this continent. Of course, looking at the program, you can tell that there are still some heavyweights that are yet to make some presentations. As I'm speaking to you now, a colleague from our part of the country, Mr. Sbusi Songalwa from the Daily Dispatch, is on the podium making a presentation. After that, we'll have a journalist from Mozambique, and of course a journalist from Malawi. Before we take a tea break, we'll also make presentation. Of course, the theme for this presentation that is currently underway is media and local government permanent advisories, something that is really, really pertinent and something that we all can relate to. So I can tell you that this conference is well underway, and they wasted no time in dealing with the issue at hand, which is holding the executive to account.
What is the mood like at the conference? Is there a lot of excitement looking forward to the next 2 days?
Well, there's a lot of optimism. Excitement is not necessarily the word I would use to describe the mood here, of course, given the seriousness of the matters that are to be discussed in this conference, of course, and given the importance of local governance in delivering services. There is a lot of optimism. Journalists are inspired to come and learn as much as they can over the next 2 days to try and make a meaningful difference when they get back to their bases. So, yeah, they are very optimistic, and they are hoping that this gathering will make a difference, and of course they will be able to contribute towards that difference. I mean, we know that particularly here in South Africa, I won't speak for the rest of the continent, but we know that every now and then, I mean, we hear of service delivery protests, people who are expressing unhappiness at the rate of service delivery at their local government level. And we are told that the media is perhaps not doing enough in covering those stories. We are more focused on what is happening at provincial and even national issues, you know, forgetting what is happening right at our doorstep, which is local governance. So this is a call upon journalists to try and take up that initiative to ensure that we hold those who are right at our doorstep to account. I mean, these are people, men and women that have been elected by us into positions of power, and they do have a responsibility to ensure that they deliver the services that their communities render, because these are the people who live in the very, very same communities. So it's not fair for them to enrich themselves rather, and serve themselves, but their duty is to serve the people. But this is not just about witch hunt from the journalist's part. Of course, it is a call also on the executive to have a fair and a frank relationship with the media, to try and communicate what they are doing and what they are planning to do, and communicate where they are experiencing, you know, some hurdles in trying to installing, in fact, what they are meant to do. So this is not just about witch hunt, like I'm saying. It is also a call on the executive to get on board and have a frank and a honest relationship with the media. All this is meant to get this continent forward and make Africa, and South Africa in particular, a better place for all those who live in it.
The theme, media accountability and local governance, is at the forefront. Will there be representation from the South African Local Government Association to give an overview on the status of local government in South Africa?
Well, looking at the program, I've noticed that they have been invited, and of course they have committed to attend this event. I mean, like I'm saying, this Highway Africa has been trailblazing since 1996, and a whole lot of people and a whole lot of themes have been tackled in this conference. And I understand that in years gone by, SALGA has been here before, and they have discussed, they have been part of these engagements, and this year is no different as well. They have been invited, and of course they are keen to come and place their side of the story on what will be happening here. So it's an all-inclusive event. Like I said, I mean, civil organization leaders are also part of this gathering here. They will have their input. I mean, it's not just presentations, it's not just authorities giving speeches. Platforms are open for those in attendance to ask questions on those who are making those presentations, which will give a great platform, particularly for those in power. Even if you are just a ward councillor, if anyone is watching in and around this area, they can also, you know, make a contribution. Of course, there are hashtags, they are available on social media. If you are unable to come here or for whatever reason, you are barred from entering it here, because it is a packed venue, to be fair to those who organized this event. Like I'm saying, 41 countries are represented here, and it is a fairly small venue, but to make it, to spread its accessibility, they have used social media to ensure that everyone does have their input on what will be happening here, and of course on what will be happening going forward, because as much as it is a two-day event, but holding local government to account and those in power in general is something that has to continue even beyond just this conference.
Unatia, thank you so much. You'll keep us posted on the conference as it continues. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much, Elvis.
That was our reporter, Unati Bengose, coming to us live from Rhodes University in Grahamstown. Now, we'll take a short break. When we return, we'll take a look at your sports news with Kendall Makamate.
With the stories of abuse from the other 8, but they haven't been ready to pursue any angles. They've offered their support, they've offered the comfort to the 8, and it's been an amazing journey.
It feels like your heart actually literally sunk in your shoes.
It wasn't a long encounter. I think at the time I froze.
The way the criminal justice system deals with sexual violence is problematic. And I don't know, unless there's a fundamental change in many things, the way prosecutors deal with the victim in the matter.
For all investigative insights, stay tuned to Special Assignment every Saturday at 17:30.
What guides us? What leads us forward? Is it the advice of our elders? Is it the actions of our people? Or the voices of our citizens? Your country is guided by the voices of its people, and your broadcaster is dependent on your voice to guide it. Get your copy of the SABC's editorial policy and have your say.
Welcome back. My name is Kendall Makhamate, and I've got your sports right here on Newsroom. Now, Africa's top-ranked tennis player Kevin Anderson has reached the 3rd round of the US Open at Flushing Meadows in New York after beating Ernest Gulbis of Latvia 6-3, 7-5, 6-4. There were also more major upsets, with 4th-seeded Alexander Zverev of Germany, France's Jo-Wilfried Tsonga and Karolina Wozniacki eliminated from the tournament. But Maria Sharapova, who was handed a wild card by the Open after her 15-month doping ban, and 2-time champion Venus Williams advanced to the 3rd round of the tournament.
18-year-old Canadian Denis Shapovalov upset 8th-seeded Jo-Wilfried Tsonga 6-4, 6-4, 7-6. Shapovalov, who had to qualify for the main draw, rose his hands in triumph after the television review showed that Tsonga's final shot had sailed over the baseline. Unseeded Croatian-born Akoric ended the campaign of fellow 20-year-old Alexandra Zverev, winning a 3-6, 7-5, 7-6, 7-6. The German 4th seed, the highest seed in the bottom half of the draw, fired down 22 aces in the match but made 7 double faults and 58 unforced errors. Zverev looked poised to settle the score when he grabbed the opening set. but the 61st ranked Croatia battled Berger to win 3 close sets, the last 2 in tie-breakers. Maria Sharapova showed she was determined to extend a Grand Slam comeback when she beat Hungary's Timea Babos 6-7, 6-4, 6-1. Sharapova made too many unforced errors in a scrappy first set that featured 6 breaks of serve. Once she found her range midway through the second set, she proved too strong for Babos. The Hungarian bowed out on the second match point when her backhand sailed over the baseline.
6-7, 6-4, 6-1.
You know, today I felt like going into the match, I knew I just wanted to get it done, and I did. It wasn't my best tennis. I felt like it was a scrappy match, but I feel like some of those days are sometimes the best because you get through and you give yourself another chance, and I felt like this was one of those days.
Russia's Ekaterina Makarova put out 5th seed and former world #1 Caroline Wozniacki of Denmark with a 6-2, 6-7, 6-1 victory in 2 hours and 20 minutes. Pesingato, SABC News.
As I mentioned earlier, Venus Williams at 37 has been showing the younger generation of tennis players a thing or two about playing Grand Slam tennis. Here's how she dispatched 20-year-old French woman Oceane Tordin in straight sets.
Match points. And with authority, Venus Williams is through to the 3rd round of the U.S. Open.
What a way to end the match.
Well, the match isn't over until you shake hands, and I understand that at this point in time. And she played some good tennis there, and she serves well, so I have to hold on to my breaks when I get them, but I'm, of course, happy to end this match as the winner.
And cricket, South Africa has announced the appointment of West Indian Otis Gibson as head coach of the Proteas national team across all 3 formats of the game. Otis's contract will run from mid-September when he starts preparing the squad for the home series against Bangladesh at the end of September until the conclusion of the ICC World Cup halfway through 2019. Gibson is currently the bowling coach of the England Test team and has previously served as head coach of the West Indies. As a player, the 48-year-old had a distinguished career for the West Indies, representing them in 2 Test matches, the second of which was the New Year Test at Newlands in 1999. He also played in 15 ODIs as an all-rounder between 1995 and 1999, and Gibson is no stranger to South African cricket as he once had spells with Border, Gauteng and Griqualand West, which is now known as the Northern Cape Cricket, as well as several England counties. CSA also announced that Russell Domingo will now become head coach of the South Africa A side, while the current incumbent Shukri Conrad will return to his previous full-time position as head coach of the Powerade National Academy. And Bafana Bafana have arrived in Cape Verde for their first leg Russia 2018 World Cup qualifier match on Friday evening. Stuart Baxter and his charges are currently tied at the top of Group D alongside Burkina Faso. With only the group winner granted automatic qualification for Russia, nothing but victory in the remaining 4 matches will secure them a spot at next year's World Cup. Bafana Bafana's road to Russia will begin with a tough test at the AstroTurf surface in Praia. Already, coach Stuart Baxter described the surface as not the best. The national team travelled to the islands off the coast of West Africa aware that a win against Cape Verde at the 15,000-seater Estadio Nacional de Cabo Verde on Friday night, then again in Durban on Tuesday, will leave Bafana in the driving seat to reach Russia in 2018. South Africa have only qualified for 2 World Cup finals in 1998 and 2002. They did appear as hosts in 2010. Now, prior to that, they'd missed the boat in 1994, 2006 and 2014. 2 victories in the next 2 matches will all but seal them passage to Russia. Minister of Sports and Recreation Tula Sinlesi has urged Bafana players to do their best and not disappoint South Africans when they play against Cape Verde. Minister Sinlesi also says Cape Verde should not be taken lightly as they've got nothing to lose, which makes them a very dangerous side.
That we are here means you are all winners. You have been selected to play at the highest level. And now you represent your country. It's not about you as an individual. You are representing a country. That's a heavy responsibility. That is an honor, but also, as I say, a heavy responsibility. On Friday, there will be millions of people watching back home. They will be cheering you on, willing you to win, and don't disappoint them. And I have faith that you can do it.
Just the other day, we were talking about Comrades Marathon winners, and already we're talking about where it will finish, because in 2018, Comrades Marathon will be finishing at the iconic Moses Mabhida Stadium for the very first time. Kingsmead was the traditional down run finish. Now, the 93rd edition of this marathon, which is a down run from Pietermaritzburg to Durban, will be 89.2 kilometers long. Entries for the race open this coming Friday and close on the 30th of November 2017.
The Comrades Marathon is said to be addictive. Run it once and you are hooked for life. The ultimate human race attracted 21,500 entrants earlier this year, but just under 18,000 started the marathon. For many years, the Comrades Marathon has been described as the best ultra-marathon in the world, and it continues to grow from strength to strength.
Most of the runners see it as a unique race, and that's what attracts people from abroad and locally. You run it once and you get addicted, and most of the runners, you will see them saying, I'm not coming back next year. Guess what? The 1st of September the following year, they are the one that they will be reminding other runners that, please runners, don't forget the window from the 1st of September with a reduced entry fee.
Last year's winner, Bongmusa Mthembu, will be back to defend his title next year. Mthembu became the first South African after the legendary Bruce Fordyce to win both the up and down runs in 27 years.
Everybody's waiting for Bongmusa to see what he's going to do in terms of down run. People have said that Bongmusa is especially down run, but all those things didn't bother me. Yes, man, it's been quite nice. We've been waiting for this opportunity for a long time up in Comrades to finish at Moses Mabhida Stadium.
Entries for next year's race will be kept at 20,000 participants. The route will be the same as in 2016, except for the last 8 kilometers. Prize money has been increased, with both the winners in the men's and women's categories to walk away with 440,000 rand. Sfiso Ramara, SABC News, Johannesburg.
This is where we're going to leave it with the sports. Thanks very much for having stayed with us. What we're going to leave you with right here on Newsroom is how dear leader Mmusi Maimane and leader of Zambia's opposition party, the United Party for National Development, Mr. Hakainde Chilema, are currently addressing the media in Cape Town. Let's go there now live and see you tomorrow morning.
In 2015, in fact, President Zuma is now the incoming chair of the SADC. He has an opportunity to reassert South Africa's leadership position in the region and the continent, and to reassert the values that South Africa will stand for in the continent. But our government's track record speaks for its own. In a recent way, they managed to release Omar al-Bashir out of South Africa in 2015, who was then still and is still wanted for war crimes, genocide, and crimes against humanity. In a more recent while, last month, the South African government, without explaining much, gave diplomatic immunity to First Lady of Zimbabwe, Grace Mugabe, and allowed her to leave our country after she'd in fact assaulted, in our view, a South African woman with a wire cord in a hotel room in Johannesburg. Grace Mugabe was facing charges of assault in South Africa before, and once again, our government ensured that she has a safe passage of exit. It is untenable that we protect big men and big systems who take action against their citizens. And here, South Africa, we must reaffirm our role. It's for that reason that I stand here as leader of the DA and say we can't allow Africa to regress. We want an Africa that upholds democratic rights, that stands for the rule of law, that in fact, opposition is allowed to have its voice. And for Africa to prosper as a continent, we must break the stronghold of liberation movements and the dictators that they often create. We are going to have to relegate all forms of nationalist politics to the scrapyard of history. Fellow South Africans, we have to make a fresh start. We must begin by restoring the supremacy of the constitutional rights of individual citizens in our nation. That is the new fight upon which our generation is engaged in. And we call upon all those in the continent who share these beliefs to stand with us at a time such as this one to pursue this endeavor. We as the DA believe we will restore South Africa's rightful role as leader in SADC and settling the continent. We have to, as a party that understands our painful past, continue the fight for democracy in the region, constitutional rights, and the rule of law. We must ensure that there is a fundamental reform to what the African Union does. That in fact, the South African Development Community, or SADC as it's called, that accountability is achieved when leaders fail to live up to that. It cannot be a principle of if you scratch my back, I will scratch yours. We have to build institutions that ensure that leaders who abuse their power are held to account. Through these platforms, such as the SABC that I chair, I'll continue to fight and continue to challenge these regional bodies for SADC and the AU to work constructively with leaders from both governing and opposition parties in states across the continent to bring about genuine democratic change in Africa. Because ultimately, in the words of Coretta Scott King, for Africa to truly be free, we are going to have to continue to work hard for freedom in our generation, in our lifetime. I want at this point to hand over to my colleague and friend, Mr. Ichilema, to address you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, colleagues, media that are here. We're grateful that you could be part of this press briefing. And of course, we would like to thank the Democratic Alliance through its leadership and our brother, Mosi Maimani, distinguished invited guests that are here. And obviously, it's fair always I learn over years that I must never forget, ladies and gentlemen, that may not have been referred specifically in our address. I think it's also important for me to greet you before I go into the detail of what we need to say to supplement what our brother has covered already, and adequately so. I bring greetings to all of you from the people of Zambia, and Zambians at home understand what is going on, understand the negativities that are going on and how they impact on their lives. Our brutal arrest and subsequent detention for 127 days have crystallized a support base domestically, regionally, and internationally that may have been lying latent for many reasons, including fear of victimization. That victimization includes or extends. If you are a poor woman who earns less than $500 per year, by trading in a small market stall in a compound somewhere in Zambia. That victimization includes being thrown out of that market store and lose the opportunity to earn income for your 6, 7, 8 children. That's what it means in Zambia. So such people, through us, are here to say thank you. Thank you to our brothers and sisters in the DA. Thank you to the unions that stood for us during some of our most difficult times. The people of South Africa, average citizens of South Africa, the media that kept our story alive. I can assure you, without the media in this country and across the world that highlighted and became a piece of evidence as a consequence of that action when our colleague, brother Musi Maimane, attempted to come to attend our court hearing in Lusaka and see us, visit us in prison, the manner in which she was treated, worse than a prohibited immigrant, worse than maybe an armed robber, being humiliated. Your story opened the world's eyes and ears to what was going on in Zambia. So it's in order, on behalf of our party and the people of Zambia, to thank the media here and elsewhere, but at the same time to apologize to the DA leader, Musi Maimane, in the manner he was treated. On behalf of the people of Zambia, we take this opportunity to render our apologies to such treatment that Musi Maimane received when he attempted to visit us. It is also in order for me to thank the church across geographical boundaries for their support, their prayers. I must remind you, here in South Africa, that the church in our country took a huge risk to talk about the decline in the democratic space in our country, and actually correctly called the regime in our country a dictatorship, even long before our friend Musi Maimane came into Zambia. And they were harassed, they were ridiculed, but they stood their ground. I want to thank them for that. I did mention the unions here, NUMSA in particular. I want to thank former Nigerian President Olusegun Obasanjo, who took a trip to come and see me in prison. I want to thank the Commonwealth Secretary General, Right Honourable Baroness Patricia Scotland, for her visit to me twice, a day after another, visiting us in prison, and also the structured manner in which she approached our detention. Ladies and gentlemen, the list is long, but really, the injustices meted on us received a national, regional, as well as international response. The list is too long to continue itemizing, but we thank everybody who was involved to secure our release. I must not waste time, but indicate very quickly that we are not free because we are out of jail, because there are a lot of political prisoners in our country who are still in detention and are being detained on a daily basis because they stand for democracy, they stand for human rights and the rule of law. So we need to remember that those require support as well. I think it's necessary for us to just articulate very briefly the circumstances or the issues surrounding our arrest, very, very briefly. You know, ladies and gentlemen, it is worthwhile to indicate that on April 10, 2017, the police in their hundreds came to our home towards midnight, heavily armed, to effect an arrest for a crime we believe we did not commit. You must ask why people came in the night. Policemen came in the night. When under this government in Zambia, I've been detained, arrested over 10 times from 2011. 10 times. And every one of those times that we were arrested, a police call-out was sent to us, and we reported ourselves to the police. And many people believe that the 10th of April was not an ordinary attempt to arrest us, but it was an attempt to kill us. So, very brutal. Subsequently, arrested. I think my brother has touched on the conditions under which we were held in detention. Solitary confinement, inhuman treatment, all of that stuff. But, ladies and gentlemen, we are here to tell you that despite all this brutality that we suffered, despite all this inhuman treatment that was meted on us by those in government, I can assure you, one, it made us stronger than before we went into jail. Number two, and this is more important, we are not angry, we are not bitter. If we are bitter, if we are angry, there's a temptation that we will respond to this detention in a similar manner to that which was effected on us. If we turn into a vindictive group, somehow now, with all our limitations, because we don't control state power, but when we get into office, if we retain this favor in the same way, then we too are unable to claim a higher ground, that we are not different, basically, from those that put us through this. And I think this is a message for us who are seeking leadership in Africa and elsewhere. That if we claim that we are better, we see things through the eye of the needle in terms of the rule of law, respect for human rights, it is not correct for us when our time in office comes to treat those who treated us in that manner in a similar way. Then we have no credibility to claim that we are better than those. We're concerned about the situation in Lesotho, exactly for that reason. And hopefully we can deal with that, all of us in the region. So there's another reason that we hold this view. And that reason is, if we treated others the way they treated us, then we will never end this negativity. And we will actually indirectly be encouraging these fellows and those that are like them to suppress their citizens even more. So, therefore, that drives me to what I need to say as to what we need to do going forward. In our country today, we have a total breakdown in the rule of law. We have court judgments that are ignored by the executive. Absolutely. Doesn't matter what, in some cases, the court says. Those in office will ignore those rulings. We have constitutional breaches that are being if you like, committed by those in office. I'll give you an example as an illustration. Somewhere around Article 103 of our Constitution indicates that when a presidential petition is submitted to the courts of law after a presidential election, the executive powers must shift to the Speaker of the National Assembly, and this is couched in the law in a mandatory way, mandatory terms, to allow for two reasons. One, a fair adjudication of the petition. Two, our Constitution provides for, if you like, immunity of the president and whoever holds executive powers. So if you go to court and take a president, sitting president to court, then the results of that petition are just an academic exercise because the president will still hold immunity. But in our case, with all these two reasons being very clear, the president refused to hand over the executive powers to the Speaker of the National Assembly. And the Speaker took no step to assume the constitutional responsibility because he was afraid of retribution. The Chief Justice could not effect this change to swear in the Speaker for that period of the petition because the following morning she would not be dreaming to expect a horde of ruling party thugs at her house breaking her house down. Absolutely. So we will break down the rule of law. How do you run a country? How do citizens live in an environment like that? So going forward, we need to restore the rule of law in our country. We need the criminal justice system that continually gets abused to a point where before a citizen is arrested for any crime, it's not because the police have done an investigation. It is because a member of the ruling party has instigated the police to arrest a citizen. You can't have a criminal justice system that operates like that. There are many other things, but I don't want to waste your time. Human rights in our country, basic fundamental human rights, liberties, freedoms have been lost. I don't want to waste your time. The list is long. Freedom of conscience, assembly, freedom of the press, fundamental freedom of the press, worship. And Musi, last week we were supposed to have a church service to basically pray about our release. On the day of the church service, over 200 policemen were sent to the Anglican Cathedral in Lusaka to stop us from worshiping. So freedom of worship. This is only a few days ago. We cannot continue like that. Absolutely not. So there are other things. I mentioned earlier, gave an example of a market woman who earns no more than $500 per year, who cannot exercise her right to earn a living in a market because she is a member of the opposition. The police working with thugs from the ruling party will hound her out of that income-generating opportunity. Let alone a civil servant working in a government department who are being removed from office, retired from national interest, even the young doctors of 30 years old, even when the hospitals have no doctors. The one doctor that is there, if he is assumed to be sympathetic to HH and the UPND, they are being removed from their employment, from the wards. It doesn't matter if patients are dying. That is serious. We need to work together to redeem that. I can assure you the judiciary is heavily eroded in our country. The decision that your courts made here to allow for a secret ballot in your confidence or no confidence motion, it doesn't matter which words is used, would never be made by a court in Zambia. Never. So there are things that you in South Africa are doing which we should learn from as Zambians, as a region, as Africa. Rule of law, judiciary, independence of the judiciary. The Electoral Commission partially brought us to where we are. I have said this, and I want to say it again here, so that it sinks. Our colleagues in government today, after our 2016 elections, August 2016 elections, are in office in the context of the threshold of 50% plus one. Our colleagues are in office on account of a mere 13,022 votes. That's what's keeping the party in office in government. 13,022 votes. So you are saying the country's, in terms of electoral map, is split into half. And these 13,022 votes were only secured after 4 days of fidgeting with the results, including a situation where a lot of polling stations were never authenticated in terms of what their numbers were. So we cannot continue like that. So we are saying the country now needs a truly independent electoral commission to maintain peace and stability as a platform for development in our country. Parliament today, I'm sure you heard our story, where 47 members of parliament from our party, we have a smaller parliament here, around 160. But of all our members of parliament, 47 were suspended from parliament for refusing to listen to the president's speech. They were suspended. I don't know how many times you would have been suspended here in South Africa, Mr. Maiman. Now it means Parliament is compromised, the judiciary is compromised by the executive. So one arm of government has compromised other arms of government, including what we call the fourth estate. I talked about it already. The media. As you know, shutdown of the largest private media, print media, Post, newspapers, television stations, shut down. You open if you plead to the powers that be. We cannot have a situation like that in our country. And this is why, going forward, we need to work together to restore, in summary, human rights. Human rights, freedoms, liberties. Parliament. The rule of law, as it were. And here is the importance of what my brother Mosi was talking about. If you or we don't work together to restore these fundamental democratic values, constitutionalism, and the others that are amplified on, you may believe that this is a Zambia problem. It's not a Zambia problem. It will spill over to you before you even think about it. If a media organization can be shut down on account that it has run a story supporting or purporting to be supporting an opposition, leaders learn bad habits from each other. Soon, rather than later, your own work here will be constrained as journalists. So pay attention to what's happening in Zambia. If Musi and the DA and the other political parties, who we really appreciate their support to us, because solidarity cannot be rejected. And I know even some people in the ruling party here are against the injustices in Zambia. Probably the injustices in your own country here, or misconduct. If you say this is for HH and UPND, it's not for us, you will be deceiving yourselves. The next time you will have your parliament swamped by heavily armed policemen. They will not just push you out of parliament, they will beat you up, as it is in our country. We've had extrajudicial killings. People will be killed, and you'll have lost your freedoms. And that's why we thank you for your efforts to stand for us. I think, to close, we are in this together. Human rights are not an issue of legislation. We are born with them. They are universal. They're in the UN Charter, way back in the 40s. But we've seen dictatorships growing in our region, on the African continent. As my brother said, if we don't stop this growth path, they will be in the majority very soon. And it means a symbiotic relationship, more dictatorship, loss of democratic space and other rights, freedoms. You will see your collapse of your economy. Absolutely. Because enterprise thrives better in a free environment. That is why we should work together even more closely with each other going forward. So the media, you are not an exception. Political parties, you are not an exception. Unions, you are not an exception. And an ordinary citizen. Finally, thank you so much, DA, my brother, for this opportunity. Thank you very much. God bless you all.
Thank you.
God bless you all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, leaders. Ladies and gentlemen, it's just an opportunity to open the floor for questions. Just state your name and your media house and pose your question. So I'll take it in rounds so that we spend more time extensively. Lucanio Kalata, I saw your hand first, and followed by you, madam. Give Lucanio a chance. Go for it. Are you here to threaten me?
No. With the free press, I think. Good morning, gentlemen. My name is Lucanio Kalata. I work for the SABC. Just two questions to Mr. HH, please. So the first question I'd like to ask is whether, with the current situation that's going on in your country, are you afraid for your own personal safety and that of your families? And then secondly, what in your opinion can South Africans do today, practically, to try and assist the people of Zambia? If there's one wish that you had that we could do as ordinary citizens, what would that be that would really help today the people of Zambia? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lupana. Madam?
Crystal Audison, the Africa Report. Specialema, your release came as a surprise because there was a court case and then suddenly, was it the pressure from the Commonwealth and former President Obasanjo, or were there other dynamics involved? Because I do recall that the court also said that the charges haven't been completely dropped, so that hangs older. So if you could just say that. And I mean, do you accept President Lunga's presidency, given that a year ago it was a mere 13,000 votes that actually separated your party from the ruling party? Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Kristen van Schie from AFP and Daily Maverick. Mr. Hishilema, I wanted to ask about the dozen or so people who've been arrested in relation with the City Market fire from the southern provinces. Are they UPND members that has been alleged? And if they are, what are you doing at the moment to ensure that they appear in court? I think some of them are on hunger strike at the moment because they still haven't appeared in court. And then for Mr. Maimani, one of the criticisms that the ruling party here receives is that it doesn't act on things in the continent because of the ties it made during the struggle movement. So in bringing opposition parties across Africa together now, what is the DA doing, or what guarantees do we have that if the DA were to come into power, it too wouldn't hold those same ties to parties it formed alliances with now?
Thank you very much. I think that's sufficient for the first round. HH?
Yes. Thank you very much for the questions. I think they are appropriate. Lukanya, my colleague there, are we afraid given the situation obtaining in Zambia? I think an ordinary human being must be concerned. Probably some would be afraid when you have lost your right to privacy. Some of you may have seen the pictures of how our property was broken into towards midnight to arguably seek our arrest. If you pictured the environment that night, or the situation with over 200 policemen, heavily armed, with machine guns, by the way, and German Shepherd dogs, and basically poison gassed us in the house, family home, with my wife and children. My wife is asthmatic and she fainted twice. From about 23 hours, we were tear gassed up to about 9 hours the following day. We survived because we made a decision in the design of the house. We never even anticipated it. It was just God's providence. We made a design that an ordinary house, somebody would have been killed that night. So a citizen, a human being, will be afraid, ordinarily. But when you know you've committed no crime, and if it's a crime to fight for human rights and the rule of law and good governance, and to fight against this cancer of corruption in Africa, leaders are getting richer. They went into office with nothing. They never knew what it was to raise an invoice and be paid and support families. All of a sudden, they're awfully rich without working. And if you stand against that so that you can save the people of your country, your region better, fear is not something that comes to my mind. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Including the horrible prison condition. It's not an issue. But it's not and should not be allowed to continue. I think that's the point. What can RSA do today to assist the people of Zambia? There's a lot that South Africa can do. What did Zambia and Zambians do during the anti-apartheid struggle with limited resources? What did we do? We carried the can by providing room, space for the anti-apartheid movement to live in Zambia. Ordinary citizens did what they could within their limitations. It took long before the apartheid struggle became a worldwide song. But Zambia played its part. As you see me seated here, I used to sit in my undergraduate days in a university next to a guy from South Africa in a university, supported by poor taxpayers. And they graduated. Some of them are ministers here. Surprise, surprise, they've forgotten that. And they were fighting against apartheid. Apartheid collapses. They take the offices that were occupied by oppressors. And they are justifying oppression. It can't be right. So, you as South Africans can do a lot as a collective, because solidarity, not to pay back, but is an obligation to protect those that are being humiliated. As a government, as an economy, talking from the business point of view, South Africa overtook the UK a long time ago as the largest trading and investment partner for Zambia. So there's leverage there. There's some things that you can do. South Africa is loaning money to Zambia. There's something you can do to use this leverage to push for the basic fundamental values. I think there's a lot more, but time is not on our side. Christie, release came as a surprise. Yes, we were eager for the trial to commence that Wednesday. As you rightly said, the indictment was changed 4 times. By the time we went for trial, I didn't even know what I was being charged for. I'm honest. A legal mind who can follow through these issues. But it just demonstrates that there was no issue there. The issue was to punish. You're right. I was surprised. I was looking forward to the hearing and basically be acquitted. I accept Lungu as president, Mr. Lungu as president. I think the right way of answering this part of the question, or this question, is that that is an issue, part of the issue or issues that brought us to where we were. Because if your petition is not heard, how can the issue of recognition come in? The coin has 2 sides. My answer to that is, anyone wants recognition, you can get it if you hear the petition. As you may know or not know, our petition was never heard. We took a civilized route to go to court and not go into the streets. I think we must respect the rule of law. That's what I would say. So, for now, it's a sore issue. Daily Maverick, City Market, are those who were arrested UPND members. I think the simplest way of making a comment here is to say, if you live in Zambia and you are conscious, you have an open mind, you know that a story was created to make the country and the world believe that our party was involved in those activities. City Market was burnt to start with, 5:30 in the morning, and this is a market guarded 24 hours by the police, armed police, including ruling party cadres working with the police. They opened the market at 5 o'clock, they continue guarding, the market is gutted, and immediately a finger was pointed at UPND before investigations. To date, we have not heard what exactly happened to that fire. It's regrettable in terms of the damage. We don't support that. But our members are being victimized and are given trumped-up charges, not just on fires, on treason like me, on aggravated. You heard one of them, a former minister, who were detained for questioning election results, but were arrested and charged with aggravated robbery. The question is not because they robbed somebody. The question was that they were charged with a non-bailable offense. And they were kept in jail for 1 year and acquitted 2 weeks ago. That's what's going on in our country. So I think the point is very clear there.
Yeah.
So I really think these are some of the reasons that we need to stand together to stop those who are taking away the rights of citizens, accusing them of crimes they did not commit, and then using state institutions to lock and put away people whose only crime is to seek a better country for all our citizens. Thank you.
Let me close just in response to that question, and then I'm sure if you want to take one-on-ones, we can do that afterwards. Yeah. But I think it would be helpful. You asked me the question, you cannot build a solidarity that is devoid of principle. The historical solidarity was focused on the defeat of oppressive regimes, and it succeeded. What it failed to do was to mature the partnership to say, what then do we stand for? Our partnership must transcend any transition because it stands for constitutionalism, it stands for values of non-racialism, it stands for the ideals that say We will stand for the rule of law. We will stand for freedoms that are enshrined in constitutions.
Absolutely.
It will transition. Now, if you hold on to those values, it then becomes crystal clear that whether you do get into government or out of government, we must defend those values. I don't stand in solidarity with HH only because he's in the opposition.
Yeah.
I stand with him because we share those values.
Absolutely.
Now, if you start to depart for those values, we can't stand in solidarity with that. And it's for that reason I am in constant contact. I was with the leader of opposition in Zambia, in Zimbabwe, having this very discussion even as recent as yesterday. We had scheduled a trip to go to Lesotho to discuss this particular issue. Because if in fact we don't act consistently with these values, then we can't stand in solidarity. And that's a long-term project. And if the DA came into power here in South Africa, I'd say when the DA comes into power in South Africa, we want to restore those values in the region rather than set up this big man politics where we cozy up to each other to dictate, to protect some form of dictatorship. So it's a job that we have to do in the region. Otherwise, you have a virtuous cycle where one dictator replaces another, and so we just keep going. And the victims of all of that are Africans.
Absolutely.
What we have to do is ensure that if we are true Democrats, then we must act in democratic ways. And that's why I always challenge. You can't have democracy without Democrats. And we have a job to do as Democrats in the SADC region to go out and maintain those values. Ladies and gentlemen, siyabulela.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for coming. The media briefing is adjourned.
You are off to lunch. I will see you.
Thank you.
Sorry.
All right, a very good afternoon. I am Alisha Jali. You're live with the midday report, and that was a media briefing by Day leader Mmusi Maimane and leader of Zambia's opposition party, the United Party for National Development, Hakainde Hichilema, who has just been released from jail after months languishing in Zambia after failure to allow the president's motorcade to pass through. Mmusi Maimane has been very instrumental in finding justice for the Zambian politician, who he said Zambia needs a new electoral body in order to restore the rule of law, democracy and constitution, because under President Edgar Lungu, the country is still under a state of emergency. Hichilema will also be a guest in the House during President Jacob Zuma's question session later this afternoon. All right, let's take a quick ad break. I'll be back with more news.